can be also recorded by individuals audibly and or visually. As well, a reminder, please, to turn all electronic devices off or to non-audible function during our committee meeting. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. Item 5.2, respecting Bill 139, Building Better Communities and Conserving Watershed Act 2017, Ontario proposed changes to the Land Use Planning Appeal System, LS 16027A, PED 16237A, citywide, has been moved to the presentation section of the agenda and will become item 7.1. Also, we have two added pieces of correspondence. 6.4I is from Jason Rodney and Catherine Donaldson, 7 Howard Boulevard, respecting item 6.4, application for amendment to zoning bylaw number 90-145Z for lands located at 21 Howard Boulevard, Flamborough, PED 17117. And 6.7I is from Laurie James, Glacier Trading Corporation, 66 Fraser Avenue, Toronto, respecting item 6.7, application to amend the City of Hamilton zoning bylaw number 6593 for lands located at 500 to 512 James Street North, Hamilton, PED 17114.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Skelly, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favour? Thank you, everyone. Is there anyone wishing or having to declare a declaration of interest today? Seeing none. Can I have approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of June 20th? Moved by Councillor Skelly, second by Councillor Partridge. All in favour? Thank you. Delegation requests. I don't believe we have any that's on here. Thank you. And consent items. Item 5.1 is the active official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and plan of subdivision application citywide. To do before you. Okay, so we've dealt with 5.1 being moved up. So do we need approval of that, Madam Clerk? That we've moved that to a presentation?
No, that was Tuesday.
Correct.
Sorry.
Right, thank you. So we're just receiving that. Correct? Yes. Thank you. Motion to receive, moved by Councillor Matthew Green, second by Councillor Connolly. Councillor Farr, question to it.
Madam Chair, just a minor housekeeping on Appendix A, page 1 of 12, first line, the one that says days since received and or deemed complete as of July 11th, 865. It says 162 Hess Street North, Ward 1. That's Ward 2. That should be fixed. Minor, but important.
Thank you.
And if
Madam Clerk is making a note of that as we speak, and the staff, I'm sure, will also make a note of that.
And if I can, through you to Jason, so this is a report that looks at reporting back. We had requested this in 2015. On a tool that seeks to monitor applications where the 120 or 180-day statutory time frame applies. So just a brief summation from staff on how many are beyond those statutory time frames at this time.
So through the chair, I can't give you a number to add them up right now, but this is all the applications we have before us. What we haven't done yet, which is still to be done in this reporting template, is to provide some commentary. Some of these applications, so this does not distinguish between applications which may have been put on hold by the applicants. In some cases, we get applications come in the door, we provide comments back, and then the applicants, for whatever reason, may decide to wait for a significant period of time. Sometimes there are some issues going back and forth. So we are going to, ultimately with this tool being adding to it a column that will speak to some commentary around what that status is.
So for future, and that is indicated in the report through you, Chair, we'll be able to distinguish whether the delay is on the part of our side or the side of the proponent, then clearly, Jay, through you?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for that commentary, Councillor, and I can speak for the issues, the applications in my ward. I know that I'm looking at the majority of them are in the hands of the developer and not staff as far as delays. So I'm well aware of that in Ward 10. So thank you. So with that, may I have a motion to, I'm sorry, Councillor Partridge?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I have two questions, actually, and one of them is along with the previous speaker raised. So there will be an additional column added for comment section. I heard you say that. When are we going to be receiving that report back, and will it become a regular item on the agenda?
Through you, Madam Chairman. So the intent is we're making the migration into the Amanda database, so we've added those fields into it. So on a go-forward basis, once we've completed that migration into Amanda, it'll generate it automatically. The planner will indicate the status of the application, whether it's with staff, under circulation, or back with the applicant. And we're working with the Amanda team, and we're hoping to have that completed either Q3 of this year or Q4 of this year, when we start reporting, that it'll have that status column attached to those applications. Because some of these applications predate when we've launched the Amanda, we're having to actually go back manually and enter into that application. And given and in terms of balancing priorities, it's moving the files forward, as opposed to whenever the planner touches the file, they're now adding that status piece. Okay. But until it's completed, we're not going to start having some cells with information and other cells without that information. But I've asked staff to try to pull it together for the Q3 or no later than the Q4 reports of this year, the status updates.
Okay, so that is going forward as opposed to going back and bringing everything up to date. And so just to clarify that I heard you correctly, Q3 or Q4, we're going to have the appendix, similar to Appendix A that's attached here, but expanded with all the files in all wards. Is that correct?
In terms of these, as it relates to through Madam Chairman, OPAs, zoning, and subdivision applications, that
right.
information, we're not including minor variances or site plans in this reporting process in this time.
Okay, yeah.
And we will be adding, so for those OPAs, zoning, and subdivisions with a status column to be added is the intent of this document on a go-forward basis.
Okay, thank you. And certainly for the ones for Ward 15, they're quite complex, and you know, we're working through them diligently, but I believe most of them are back with the applicants waiting for some things to be finished. On page 3 of the report, it lists as of May 10th, 2017, and it gives a listing of active official plan amendments, active zoning bylaws, and active plan of subdivision applications. But it does not include files that have been appealed to the OMB. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, that is correct.
And my next question is, do we know how many files we have at the OMB? I know I've got 3 right now, but just citywide. Do we have any idea how many are at the OMB?
I don't have that information right now, but that's certainly information that we could help.
If you can
our
get
colleagues
back to
provide.
me with that, I'd appreciate it. Just by email is fine, Madam Chair. And those are my questions. Thank you.
I'd ask that it be emailed to all committee members, that information, please. Thank you. So with that, it has been moved and seconded. Item 5.1, all in favor? Carried. And item 5.2 is going on as a presentation. So we're moving on to item 6, delegations and public hearings. 6.1 is an application for approval of draft plan of condominium, common element, for the lands located 1169 Garner Road East, Ancaster, PED 17119, Ward 12. So I have to go out to the public. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the draft plan of condominium, common element. The person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So I'm going to go out to the audience. If you could indicate, is there anyone here wishing to speak to this item? Again, this is with regards to 1169 Gardner Road East, Ancaster. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this item? Going once? Going twice? Anyone here wishing to speak to this item? 3 times. I will close off to the floor. Thank you. I'm seeing that no one has come forward. Can I have a motion to waive the staff presentation? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Connolly. All in favor? Thank you. And I do know that the applicant's agent, I think, is he present? Yes. Good morning, James. Are you satisfied with staff's recommendation? Wonderful. Thank you very, very much. So with that, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just, through you to staff, the ward councillor is fine with this. You've worked through. Can I have confirmation of that, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have contacted Councillor Ferguson regarding this application. We were very diligent in getting a hold of him, and he is not present today, but if he does have any other questions, we're more than happy to work with him.
I can advise at agenda review yesterday, I asked the same question, and I understand that he is satisfied, and he may have had some questions, but he is satisfied with the application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So with that, we've closed off the meeting to the floor. We've asked the agent, so now may I have a motion regarding the staff recommendation, and that the amendments, there were no public submissions that affected the decision. Moved by Councillor Brenda Johnson, second by Councillor Connolly. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Item 6.2. Sorry. Is an amendment to zoning bylaw number 05200 for lands located at 49 Ancaster Road, Flamborough, PED 17115, Ward 14. And again, I have to go out to the public. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So again, I'll go out to the public 3 times. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this particular item? Going once? Going twice? 3 times. I will close off to the floor. Thank you. May I have a motion to close off to the floor? Councillor Partridge. Moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Skelly. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. And I'll turn to Mr. Ed Fothergill. I know is in the audience. Are you satisfied with staff recommendation, sir? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Councillor Partridge, I'll turn to you. Yes.
Yes,
Trying to read and engage everyone at the same time.
I know, and you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job, considering it's summertime. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm delighted to move this particular file forward. If I can get a seconder, I just want to comment that Joe Loeth and Sons is one of the largest dairy farmers in our rural area and certainly contributes a great deal to our agri-economy. Very important. I'm pleased to see this file for expansion in front of us. It is not entirely housekeeping, but it is kind of housekeeping. The Niagara Escarpment Commission has issued the permit. There are no issues. And really what this report is about is just bringing forward the conditions that were attached to the Committee of Adjustment. And, you know, it's easily supported. So I ask all my council colleagues to please support it. And I'm very pleased to move it at this time, seconded by Councillor Brenda Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Skelly wishing to ask a question? No? Thank you. So with that, it's been moved and seconded, and that the staff recommendation with indicating there were no public submissions to affect the decision. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. 6.3 is an application for amendment to zoning bylaw number 05200 for lands located at 1226 Sodom Road, Flamborough, PED 17116, Ward 14. Again, as a public meeting, members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OMB unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So once again, going out to the public 3 times, is there anyone here wishing to speak to this item? 1226 Sodom Road, Flamborough. Going once? Going twice? 3 times? Thank you, everyone. Seeing no one in the audience, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, with 6.3 for the lands at 1226 Sodom Road, Neil Vanderkirk Holdings and Associate. I'm pleased to bring this one forward as well. In a similar situation to the previous, Committee of Adjustment did approve the land severance. This report is simply putting into cause and effect the conditions that were attached to that Committee of Adjustment. So I'm very pleased to move it and close off the public hearing at the same time.
So I'll have you as a mover, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson, but I do want to turn to, is it Chris Van Berkel? Is Chris Van here? Good morning, Chris. You're satisfied with staff recommendation? Good, wonderful, thank you, sir. So we have it moved and seconded, and that there were no public submissions that have, I'm sorry? Yeah, then there were no public submissions received to affect this decision. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Carried. If all the Flamborough ones could be like this. Oh, don't speak too soon. 6.4 is an application for amendment to zoning bylaw number 90-145Z for lands located at 21 Howard Boulevard, Flamborough, PD 17117, Ward 15. Again, members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment. The person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OMB unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So in this particular item, we also have two items of correspondence. May I have a motion to receive item 6.41? Councillor Partridge. Moved, second by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? Thank you. And I'm going to turn to the public. Is there anyone here, again, indicating wishing to speak to this item? Going once. So again, this is 21 Howard Boulevard, Flamborough. Going twice. No hands. Going 3 times. Thank you very much, everyone. Motion to close off to the floor and to waive staff presentation. Moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. I didn't hear or see who tinkled. Councillor Partridge, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And this will be the end of Flamborough Day for the Planning Committee, I believe, but very much appreciate everybody's indulgence. I do have a couple of questions for staff. One is, as a result of the correspondence that did come in from another resident on Howard Boulevard, we have some variance requests in this report, and I just want to make sure the resident is saying if this would enable the property owners to build more than 2 single detached dwellings, or if it would allow the building close to the road, past the existing house sight lines on the street, they would be against it. So that's a 2-part question, if staff could please provide an answer for that.
Through the chair to the councillor, with respect to the first point, the more than 2 single detached dwellings, the lot is proposed to be severed, so there would be 2,
Right.
but not more than 2 on those
Thank you.
severed portions.
Yep.
And then with respect to the front yard setback, there is not a variance requested, so they would be maintaining the 7.5 meter required front yard setback.
Okay, thank you. And that's what basically it says in the report, but I just wanted to give some assurance to the residents that that is indeed the case. And if I may speak to the report, Madam Chair?
Yes, can I just go out one moment? Les Zarka is the owner, is present, and I just wanted to be sure. Good morning. You're satisfied with staff recommendation? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Councillor Partridge, just so you can see.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate that. On Howard Boulevard, there are several properties along this route that have already been severed, and new homes been built on them, and really it is a bit of an improvement to the area, although it's a lovely area with lovely large lots, but there's not a lot of them left at this point. So this is not setting a precedence of any kind. There's several that are existing that have gone through the exact same process. Knowing that the residents' concerns have been addressed, I'm very pleased to move this for approval to the committee. If I can get a seconder.
I have Councillor Connolly second again.
Councillor Connolly, thank you very much. And again, I want to thank the applicant for going through the process, working with staff, and coming forward to today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So it's moved and seconded, but I just want to do some housekeeping because, Madam Clerk, I think I only received the 1 item correspondence. There is 2. It's 6.7I is also a second piece of course. Sorry, Madam Clerk, I just want to be sure.
6.7I is with respect to 6.7.
Oh, sorry. Okay, excellent. Perfect. Jumping back too fast. Councillor Partridge moves, second by Councillor Connolly, and that should indicate that the correspondence did not affect the decision. Madam Clerk, you have that? All in favor, everyone? Thank you. And before I move on, I just want to say I think we have Elena Baldassara, a new planner with us at the city. Welcome. So I know I'm seeing a lot of new faces at the back row there. So welcome, and hope you enjoy. And it's very exciting, I know that. Okay, everyone, now we're going on to 6.5 is applications to amend the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and City of Stoney Creek zoning bylaw number 369292 for lands located at 26 Upper Mount Albion Road, Stoney Creek, PED 17121, Ward 9. Again, members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and zoning bylaw amendments, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So, again, out to the public, 3 times. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this item? This is 26 Upper Mount Albion Road. Going once? Going twice? 3 times? Close off to the floor. Can I have a motion to close off to the floor and waive staff presentation? Do we have moved by Councillor Connolly, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson? Yes, Councillor Johnson?
Just a quick question, and only from my former life in the Aramosa Karst. I noticed on page 14 of 29 that there is a provision that professional geoscientists with demonstrated expertise in karst environments, which demonstrates the function of the conduit, can be maintained. Robert, I know that the houses immediately to the north and houses immediately to the west all have sinkholes in their backyards. We're all very familiar with this. So is this to assure us that this is all going to be taken care of before somebody puts a basement in there and finds out that they're now inside a cave?
Through the chair, in the amending bylaw, there's a requirement for no basements in this provision. And also through the site plan control process or site plan process, there will be geotech studies required to ensure that the surrounding neighbors
Thank
have been
you.
addressed.
And I think that that's also a good thing for the builder as well, because I don't think they want any surprises either. So thank you. Those are my questions.
Excellent point. Thank you, Councillor, for raising that. So with that, we have a motion to close off this presentation and waive the presentation and close off to the floor. Moved by Councillor Connolly, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor? Thank you. And I'm just going to turn to then Mr. Mallard. Good morning, sir. Are you satisfied with staff's recommendations? Yes, we are. Thank you very, very much. Okay, I'm going to, hang on, I had Councillor Green and the ward councillor.
Sorry, it's not on this item, it's on the next one.
Okay, then we'll wait for you. Councillor Connolly on this item.
Just a couple of comments. Thank you for the report. This is a short-term facility, I guess you would say, for a care facility for people that have had brain injuries. And it's a traditional house, I guess, to help them recover. As it holds 42 different residents. I think it's a great idea. I'm really glad to see it coming, and I'm glad it's coming in my ward. And I appreciate you, the committee supporting it, so we can move forward on this. And it's going to be a positive influence for us in Ward 9. Thank you.
Excellent, Councillor. Thank you so much. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the staff recommendation moved by Councillor Connolly, second by Councillor Farr, and that there were no written submissions that affected the decision? All in favor? Carried, everyone. Items, Councillor Green.
Madam Chair, if I could ask the committee's indulgence, I had one job today, and that was to inform Councillor Marula in a due time and when this item would be coming up. Respecting the fact that there has been a kind of a lightning strike of items that have moved by, I would ask that we move 6.7 in advance of this. I know I didn't anticipate that. He's on his way, but I know he really wants to be here for the YWCA, so I know he's on his way, and my job was to inform him when to come. I just did not anticipate it would go this fast.
Is there anyone here for this item, 6.652 to 64 Ottawa Street North? Is there anyone here for this item?
Yes.
So you're okay if we just wait a few? Fine. I'm sure he's in support of this, so Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, actually, 6.5, there was some correspondence. It's Appendix E, so you might want to revert your approval.
Public submissions did not affect the decision. We had.
Oh,
that
I
in there.
thought you said no, there wasn't.
Public submissions did not affect the decision. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on then to 6.7, and I'll keep an eye out then. So, 6.7 is an application to amend the City of Hamilton zoning bylaw number 6593 for lands located at 500, 502, 504, 506, 508, 510, and 512 James Street, North Hamilton, PED 17114, Ward 2. Again, members of the public. In accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OMB unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are grounds to do so. And this is the one where we have the written comments, and I'm going to ask for a motion to receive the written comments of item 6.7I, or 1 from Laurie James of Glacier Trading Corporation, 66 Fraser Avenue, Toronto, moved by Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you. We also have a registered speakers, but I think we're going to turn to staff for staff presentation. Tiffany Singh, good morning, another new face.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Planning Committee and members of the public. So the application before you today is to amend the City of Hamilton zoning bylaw 6593 on lands known as 500 to 512 James Street North. Sorry, I'm just going to use this clicker. Yeah. Okay. Does this point? Sorry. Thank you. Sorry?
Jess?
No, I was just going to ask Ida to lower that screen, but I think you might need it. Yes, so I just realized that. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so the subject site is a corner lot located at the northeast corner of James Street North and Picton Street East. It's approximately 400 meters north of the West Harbour GO station. A rezoning of the lands is required in order to construct a 4-story mixed-use building consisting of a place of worship located on the ground floor and multiple dwelling with 45 affordable residential dwelling units above. More specifically, the zoning bylaw amendment application is to amend the City of Hamilton zoning bylaw from the G neighborhood shopping center, et cetera, district to H community shopping and commercial, et cetera, district. To add a site-specific zoning regulation in order to permit a multiple dwelling use with the already permitted place of worship use, and to include site-specific standards regarding front yard setback, side yard setback, number of residential parking spaces, loading spaces, planting strip width, and encroachments into the required front yard for both a covered front porch and uncovered porch. Lastly, the change in zoning would also include a holding provision for a required record of site condition, as the proposal is for a more sensitive land use than the site is currently used for today. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing commercial building and to construct a 4-story mixed-use building. The place of worship and accessory uses, such as office space and Sunday school services, would be located in the 1-story component and the basement of the overall building, fronting onto James Street North at the northwest corner of the subject lands. While the multiple dwelling component of the proposed development, consisting of 45 affordable units, would be located within the upper 3 stories of the 4-story component of the building that would be located closest to Picton Street East. 20 parking spaces are proposed on a surface parking lot located at the rear of the building. 8 of those parking spaces would be for residents, and the remaining 12 would be for visitors. Lastly, an outdoor amenity space is provided on the corner along Picton Street East. This first elevation is the south side that would be fronting onto Picton Street East. The second elevation shows the west side that would be fronting onto James Street North. The first elevation here depicts the north side that would be facing the property to the north, which is 520 James Street North. And the last elevation is depicting the east side that would be facing the residential homes that are located to the east of the subject site off of Houston Street. Those properties would be separated by a laneway and the proposed parking area. This is an aerial photo of the subject land. So the property is approximately 0.27 hectares in size. As mentioned earlier, the subject site is located about 400 meters away from the new West Harbor GO station and is serviced by number 4 Bayfront bus and the seasonal route 99 that operates from June to September. The lands are designated mixed use development with ground-related community uses such as the proposed place of worship, and a multiple dwelling above is permitted. Further, the proposed building height of 4 stories with a maximum, the maximum height of 4 stories is permitted. The lands are identified as a corridor of gradual change adjacent to a stable area. The proposal is providing an appropriate transition in height and massing with respect to the character of the existing neighborhood, while providing a community use at grade fronting onto James Street North. The current zoning permits a place of worship, but does not permit the multiple dwelling. The site-specific zoning would permit the proposed multiple dwelling use and modify the specific requirements as mentioned earlier in order to implement the proposal. Now we'll go through some images of the surrounding area. This image shows the subject site looking northeast from the corner of James Street North and Picton. So the proposal will contain large windows along the front facade of the building, fronting onto James Street North, and an amenity space on the corner along Picton. So this will add a lot of interest to the area as well as animating the public realm at this intersection. This is an image of the rear of the subject site looking northwest from Picton Street East at Houston Street North. So you can see the existing surface parking lot to the rear and a portion of 520 James Street North, which is the subject site or the property that's located north of the subject site. This is an image looking southwest towards the subject site from James Street North and McCully. The smaller 1-story component of the proposed building will provide a good transition to the existing 1-story commercial property that's located at 520 James Street North. And here's a head-on image of 520 James Street North taken directly from the west side of James Street. So again, this is the building that's located closest to the proposed development on the north side. Again, here you can see the back of the adjacent building at 520 James Street North. The proposal will maintain the parking area, as already mentioned, providing the main entrance along James Street North and providing a barrier-free access at grade. And this image is looking east towards the properties located east of the subject site. These are the homes that front onto Houston Street North. So this is the front of those homes. This is the rear. And this is an image of the properties located on the south side of Picton. The proposed 4-story component of the building that's proposed would be located on the southern portion of the subject lands closest to these existing 2- and 3-story dwellings. And this is the southeast corner of James Street North and Picton Street East. So you can see Harbor Diner on the end there. And this image is of the existing row houses across the street on the northeast corner of James Street North and Picton. And this is that same row house development, but the units that are fronting directly onto James Street. And this is taken from the subject site looking northwest from the site towards these existing 2- and 3-story buildings that are located at James Street North and McCully. And for context purposes, this is an image looking west towards James Street along Picton Street East. So the subject site is on the right side there, and the existing homes on Picton Street, the south side of Picton Street, are located there on the left. So now moving forward to discuss the public comments received, a notice of complete application was circulated to 229 registered property owners within 120-meter distance of the property site. 14 supportive letters were received, as well as 112 supportive postcards. 5 letters expressing concern were received. Concerns expressed were regarding use, height, overlook, public laneway access, on-street parking, traffic construction impacts, servicing costs, impacts on the property value in the area, and parking space sizes. However, with regards to that last one, parking space sizes, staff had actually requested that the applicant revise the parking plan to meet the 6593 parking space dimensions, and they agreed to that, so that's no longer a concern in terms of the size of parking spaces provided. So with regards to use, concern over the proposed multiple dwelling use for affordable housing purposes and the lack of retail use was mentioned. As mentioned earlier, this property is located on an arterial road identified as a mixed-use property in the secondary plan, which permits a range of uses which include multiple dwellings and a place of worship. As the area is slated for transit investments, the development will support increased usage of the new West Harbour GO station and the proposed BRT line along James Street North. Further, the provision of affordable housing units will provide more affordable housing stock to the city's current housing stock, providing a community use that will also contribute to the creating a complete and vibrant community. Building height. Concerns regarding the proposed height and potential impacts to the low-rise residential character of the area were mentioned. The proposal is for a maximum height of 4 stories and 14 meters, which is permitted in the West Harbour setting sail secondary plan. The proposed development maximizes the use of the subject site located on an arterial road and is located, as mentioned earlier, 400 meters north of the West Harbour GO station. It will be providing an adequate scale and transition from James Street North to the low-rise character of the immediate surrounding neighborhood. Further, a component of the proposed building is only 1 story high, and that is adjacent to the 1-story commercial building that's located at 520 James Street North. With regards to privacy and overlook, it is noted that the proposed development has been situated in a location that is as far possible from the existing residential uses within the neighborhood, with the exception of the proposed multiple dwelling units, which would be located across the street from 16 and 18 Picton Street East. The 4-story building proposed will not include any balconies for the residential units. In addition, the building will be set back 1 meter from the southerly lot line and separated by a 20-meter right-of-way across Picton Street East. And with regards to the residential units that are located to the east along Houston Street North, the proposed building is separated by approximately a 10-meter surface parking lot and 6-meter wide private laneway. And with regards to on-street parking concerns, a parking justification study was submitted by the applicant and reviewed by Parking Services. Based on their survey of comparable affordable housing projects and church sites located in Hamilton, the proposed 45 dwelling units would be expected to generate a demand of 10 parking spaces. Staff noted that the proposal for affordable housing units can be operational with an overall reduced residential parking rate of 0.17 spaces per unit. as many of the future tenants will not have access to a vehicle, and the site is located within close proximity to several existing transit routes and amenities, including restaurants, schools, and parks in the area. Lastly, there will be a provision of 22 short-term bicycle parking spaces and 20 long-term bicycle parking spaces interior to the building, which will encourage alternative modes of transportation. There is no parking requirement for the place of worship component. So the only parking that we need to discuss at this point is really for the multiple dwelling component. So furthermore, the applicant has entered into a formal agreement with the North Hamilton Community Health Center for overflow parking located within 300 meters of the subject site. So this would be 98 spaces that will assist with overflow parking during peak hours, such as Sunday service, or if they have a special event of some sort. But again, parking for the place of worship use is not a zoning bylaw requirement. Concerns related to density and traffic generation. It is staff's opinion that the introduction of a multiple dwelling, 45 units, provides an appropriate density at this location and will serve to enhance and diversify this underutilized site. It's in close proximity to the GO station and many existing transit routes. With regards to car traffic, the increase generated by the proposed development would be modest. It's anticipated that most residents would not have access to a vehicle, as already mentioned. Higher traffic levels can be anticipated on Sundays for the planned church services, but as already mentioned, they have made arrangements for those additional parking spaces off-site. Furthermore, a traffic impact study was not required by a corridor management group. Construction impacts. So there was some concern raised regarding potential impacts to the foundations of surrounding homes. The subject lands are over 16 meters away from the closest existing residential dwelling property. As a result, construction should have no impact on the foundation of homes immediate or in the surrounding area. Staff are currently not aware of any supporting information that would substantiate this concern. However, should there still be any concern regarding construction impacts, development engineering will be requiring a detailed construction management plan to be submitted through the site plan control stage. Servicing costs. Development engineering have reviewed the proposed servicing and the submitted functional servicing report and stated that they had no concerns with respect to the infrastructure and development proposed. Property value. This is the last item of concern. There was concern regarding the affordable housing component of the application. However, staff are not aware of any supporting real estate information that would substantiate this concern. So, in summary, staff are recommending approval of the rezoning application as the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms with the 2017 growth plan, in terms of intensification and development of complete communities. The application complies with the policies of the Hamilton-Wentworth official plan, the City of Hamilton official plan, and the West Harbour Setting Sail secondary plan. And the proposed development is compatible with the existing land uses in the immediate area and represents good planning by, among other things, providing for development of a complete community and enhancing the streetscape along James Street North and Picton, making efficient use of existing infrastructure within the urban boundary, and providing affordable housing to our current housing stock. So that summarizes my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Tiffany. I'm going to turn to the ward councillor. Councillor Farr, question?
Thank you. Tiffany covered most of everything needed to be covered. Just some last-minute correspondence, Tiffany, from the neighbor to the north, who also, I believe, corresponded in our agenda package today. So first things first, both the proponent and the neighbor to the north who's corresponded today are not on for the 1.8 meter high fence. How do I go about taking that condition out of this approval process? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair. Staff are supportive of this last-minute change, as the application will still maintain a planting strip along the north side of the lot line adjacent to 520 James Street North and the proposed parking pad.
So we can,
So what we can do is amend the draft bylaw before it goes to council, should it be approved.
remind me to do that. Thank you, Chair. And finally, some other bullets were included in this communication. Concerns with respect to the hydro transformer, laneway access. There's concerns over the completion of a number of studies and conditions that need to be met before receiving site plan and ultimately the building permit. On that point, through you, Chair, that's not out of the ordinary. We do that all the time, set conditions.
Correct. Through you, Madam Chair. Dealing with the RSC through a holding provision is a typical method of dealing with that requirement. As well, in the comments received, there was mention of a traffic impact study, and I just wanted to clarify that a traffic impact study was not required. However, it was noted by corridor management that a transportation demand management study, which looks at alternatives to car use, would be required as part of their site plan application. So a traffic impact study was not required.
And finally, if you could just expand, thank you, Tiffany, through you, Chair. I've heard it before, and fair enough, anytime, whether it's something on the affordable housing spectrum as important as what's before us here today, or just any new development that, that incorporates greater density and is different than what exists, whether it's a surface parking lot in the ward or a single-family home that wants to become the proponent wants to build a duplex. Change can attract and will attract some opposition, and that's why we do public meetings. But I have tried for years on the point of proving that affordable housing, in this case, or supportive housing in this case, decreases immediate area real estate values. Can you take us through how you, I mean, you've already shared that there's no evidence of that. I've talked to real estate folks, I've talked to housing staff, I've spoken to planners over the years. There is no definitive evidence that this has happened. And in fact, Indwell, who's a big part of this project here today, along with Houston Baptist Church, already operate 4 or 5 facilities in the downtown core where, and very much included the north end here, real estate assessment values have just gone skyrocketing through the roof. So how do you go about determining your findings in that there is no definitive evidence that real estate values decrease when a facility such as this is built? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's simply a review of any existing planning studies that review this kind of material. And unfortunately, there is no substantial evidence or empirical data that has been collected to prove that affordable housing projects will negatively impact property values. In this area in particular, the proposed development is not only an affordable housing complex, it is also providing a community use with a rather attractive corner, helping to animate the street. And I think it's really important to kind of review the application overall and not just one piece or the other. So.
And we might add, through you, Chair, community use as run by an operator who for decades has proven themselves as extremely effective in programming community uses. Thank you very much. Thank you. Tiffany, you've been great on this file. We've turned it over fairly quickly. Grants and deadlines are important, and of course, Council's own mandate to provide greater opportunities as it relates to affordable housing across the spectrum, particularly in the SSSP, setting sales secondary plan area, all relevant to today's agenda item here today. So thank you, Madam Chair. Tiffany, great work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Couldn't agree more, Councillor, and I will come back to you at the end before we move the recommendation. So, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And again, just a comment actually following right along this line of questioning from the ward councillor. Tiffany, fantastic job on the presentation. Very well presented, very polished as I was listening through it. I also appreciated it in the end when you just made that statement around looking at it being more than just a simple planning process. You've aligned it here to the 2016 strategic plan, specifically around the idea of diverse local economies, the idea of safe and supportive cities that are just, and the culture and diversity. So is this something that we can anticipate, whether through you to Jason or Tiffany, if you'd like to answer, that we can maybe communicate even more broadly so people get a sense that when we're doing these types of projects, it's more than just parking spaces and blueprints. It's about building communities and supporting communities. Can somebody just speak to that for a moment?
Sure, and we certainly can, and I think not just referring back to the strategic plan, but increasingly we're trying to pull some of that language into our actual planning documents. You see a lot of that language in the official plan, and that's intended to make sure that message is out there. And we can certainly make sure that that's getting reflected in the staff reports as they come forward, so that council and the public can see that those are some of the considerations we make as we're reviewing applications.
And so through you, Madam Chair, just as a further comment to that, I having kind of listened intently to the Houston community, the True City movement that's happening in the city, looking at ways that they can be very practically involved. The faith-based groups can be practically involved in helping alleviate the housing pressures. I think what we have before us through Tiffany's presentation and through the work of Indwell is a blueprint, hopefully, that we can see with other developments. So the last thing I'll say through you to Jason is if there's any of these that are coming online in Ward 3, let me know. We're in full support.
Thank you, Councillor. So with that, may I have a motion to receive the staff presentation, moved by Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Green. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. And now I have Graham Cubitt of Indwell House, the applicant of Houston Street Baptist Church owner, and George Zajac of Armstrong Planning and Project Management in attendance, and you're coming down also with the PowerPoint presentation. We're not there yet, ma'am. When your turn comes, we'll allow it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Graham Cubitt. I'm the Director of Projects and Development at Indwell, and I'd like to introduce two colleagues, George Zajac from Armstrong Planning and Reverend Dwayne Klein from Houston Street Baptist Church. I'll lead us through the brief presentation following up on the excellent presentation that Tiffany made. And then if there's any questions, of course, an hour later, we're happy to answer those. I do want to, first of all, say thank you to Tiffany and the team in planning for your excellent presentation, but not just the presentation, the work on this file, and for Councillor Farr and others in helping us understand and listen to the needs of the community, and indeed reflect a lot of the, try to reflect some solutions for the needs that our community is facing more broadly. This conversation between Indwell and Houston Street Baptist began about a year and a half ago. The constant refrain in the news, in the newspaper, in the community was the desperate need for affordable housing in the North End. And the church, being an active participant in that community for 130 years, was listening closely to those conversations and feeling very uneasy about the lack of solutions that were being proposed. So they called us, and we went for a drive around the neighborhood, and churches being what churches are, they said they committed it to prayer and wanted to really feel where they were being led to perhaps engage in an area that the church had not historically had a lot of experience. We walked around the neighborhood, we drove around the neighborhood. This is the North End community, as Tiffany had a map as well. There's very little social housing in the North End, 500 James and the Jamesville site are a couple properties owned by City Housing Hamilton. But historically, this is a neighborhood that has had 45 or 50% maybe renters, and historically has had relatively affordable housing due to the nature of the community. But as we all know, that's changing rapidly with housing prices. This is the property at 500 James that the church bought a number of years ago. and with the intention of building a new church building. Indeed, the church had gone through the process of developing the property, rezoning the property, and had plans, building plans submitted to the building department to just go ahead and build a single-purpose church building when all of this conversation took a different direction to possibly include affordable housing. Indwell has been in Hamilton for 45 years, and developing our expertise in supporting the community's most vulnerable, people living with mental illness, people living with disabilities of all sorts. As we say, people seeking health, wellness, and belonging. It's not one diagnosis, it's not one special need, it's just people who are our neighbors who are looking to live well and live independently in the community. You might recognize a couple of these projects. The top left is 1430 Main Street East, Rudy Hulse Commons, which we opened last summer. It's 47 apartments with ground floor commercial space and our offices there. On the top right is Strathern Suites at 311 Strathern Avenue up by Strathbarton Mall. A transformation of a very derelict rooming house and now an actual place of home for 39 people who live there in partnership with St. Joseph Hospital, the Lynn, and indeed the City of Hamilton. The bottom left corner, the former Driftwood Hotel and Tavern had become a troubled location, and we were able to turn that into the Perkins Center about 5 years ago with 46 apartments and ground floor commercial mixed-use space. And the bottom right corner is not in this municipality, it's in Oxford County. Harvey Woods Lofts transformed a former knitting mill and factory into a mixed-use community, mixed-use apartment building with 54 apartments. Currently, we're actually building 26 more, and community spaces in that building as well. So this type of mixed-use facility was something which we have been developing some expertise in and which attracted Houston to have a conversation with us. Obviously, as a Christian charity, we also have strongly aligned values that we wanted to commit to the process of listening to the community's needs and really addressing using whatever abilities we had to do so. Both organizations are strongly committed to community engagement. And as Tiffany mentioned, the process of community consultation has been ongoing. From those first conversations with the congregation, those morphed to individual conversations within the neighborhood associations and various community groups. We had our first sort of formal gathering was a year ago or so, June 1st, 2016, where we had over 100 people attend a community input session on the project. Later that fall, we had a neighborhood focus group with some close neighbors from Houston and Picton and nearby, which provided a lot of input into the project. Public open house in December, followed by a discussion with an adjacent neighbor from 520 James, both in December, which contributed further ideas to the ongoing development of the project. And then we had a community update meeting most recently, just 2 weeks ago, where we shared the project plans as they've been evolving ahead of this meeting with the community. This was the original concept we presented back in June. As you know how these projects go, you have to put together all the programmatic ideas, the needs that the church had for a worship space. The church has historically had a strong sports ministry and youth activities. So they wanted a gymnasium, a full-size gymnasium as part of the programmatic elements. Obviously, housing needed to be a part of that if we were going to build apartments. Parking is always a requirement of some description, so we included that. And we put those various elements together into this concept. Now, it wasn't met with a lot of enthusiasm at that first meeting. Comments like, it's too boxy, what's with the barn style? Where did that 60s motel come from? Those kinds of things were expressed. And so we took all of that feedback and said, how can we revise it? Well, the feedback may have had different types of tone at different times. The underlying theme was, can you please design something that will really respect the culture and the needs of this neighborhood? And really, really highlighted through each of these conversations that there is a genuine acute need for affordable housing with supports in this neighborhood, particularly some accessible housing. So we took all of those ideas and went back to the drawing board a number of times. We made the project much lower. We got rid of the bridge We reduced the building form substantially to grade level. We moved the residential entrance from the front corner at James Street to down Picton to give it a much more residential feel and give the church more prominence at the corner. We animated the James Street facade by moving the windows from the top, higher on the wall to the ground plane so that the street traffic can interact with the inside activities. We pushed the building back an additional 10 meters from the alleyway, which actually resulted in over 16-meter setback from the neighboring property line to the east, reducing the overlook as well by taking 30% of the windows off of the east facade. So there were a significant number of things that were responsive to the community's needs. Another issue which actually had been raised as a common theme through the community meetings is how can this building be a green building or a sustainable building? And using a lot of that feedback and our own commitment to environmental consciousness, and indeed referencing the city's climate change action plan, we've designed this building to be one of the most energy efficient buildings in Ontario and indeed in Canada. We call it 2030 ready, so we'll be when this building will be built, we'll meet the city and the province's 2030 climate change targets for emissions. And indeed, most likely the 2050 targets, but we have to get there, get a few details worked out yet. It's using passive house design methodology, which is an extremely energy efficiency standard from Europe. So we're very proud of that as well, and that's something which came to the fore through the community consultation. Sun shadow studies were performed. We took all of the feedback from the community and of course did all of the modeling and all of the various reports that Tiffany alluded to, and really trying to have the least impacts on the neighborhood and indeed the adjacent neighbors. This picture shows sort of 5:30 p.m. on June 21st, the longest day of the year. The shadows only start to hit the backyards of the adjacent neighbors at 5:30 in the afternoon. So there's full sun most of the day. With minimal impact from this building. Indeed, this is a building, Indwell's approach and Houston Street Baptist Church's approach is this a building that we would want to live in and that we would want to live next to? And if we can answer that question in the affirmative on both counts, then that's where we feel comfortable putting that proposal forward. And we're very confident that we would like to live both in this building or next to this building. Tiffany did mention this question about parking. Parking is always a question for planning applications, we know that. And we have done a lot of studies on our properties currently throughout Hamilton and in other municipalities. Our buildings require very minimal amounts of parking, and that was justified both by the planning or by the parking studies as well as the calculations through the parking department, traffic department, and which was in the planning report there. And there is a formal parking agreement with the North Hamilton Community Health Centre to use their parking. I believe it's 98 spots during times when they're not using it. So that's a significant amount of parking that's already available in the neighborhood that we're able to use. In terms of the rest of the planning and the design issues, we've been able to incorporate the vast majority of the suggestions from the community members who participated in this conversation over the last year. And we're really pleased with the results that have come out of that. Indeed, these kind of projects are complicated. We know that there's a lot of interest in affordable housing. There's a lot of interest in supportive housing, but there's not always a clear sense of how to achieve the outcomes we want. We're a very strong group of partners in this project, led by Houston Street Baptist Church with 130 years of experience in the community. Indwell with 45 years experience providing affordable housing with supports. We're working obviously with the federal and provincial partners as funders through this project. It meets the city's strategic plan goals for affordable housing with supports, and we have a long track record of working with the city to make sure that this type of project is of maximum benefit. And of course, our design team is very experienced in developing projects of this type with Envisage Architects, Armstrong Planning, and our team of engineers. So we're very pleased that a public-private partnership investing up to $17 million roughly, 10 million of that, 10 plus million of that contributed by the private sector towards maximum civic benefit. We're really pleased that the end result will be 45 apartments, 9 of them accessible, world-class energy efficiency, and a building that our whole community can use through its multi-use planning and design. So we're very thankful to be a part of this project, and we're very excited to move forward with it. And in particular, we do want to thank our community for helping actually guide the design and the coming to fruition of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I have a speaker's list. I have Councillor Skelly, Councillor Farr, and then Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Graham. Thank you for this presentation, and I do support it. I think it's an initiative, a project that is very important for this city, and I admire the fact that you're addressing one of our big needs, which is affordable housing, which brings me to my question, and that is something that you referenced, supportive housing. Can you expand a little bit on the client base within supportive housing?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a very important question. We talk about affordable housing with supports because we recognize that many people are seeking affordable housing, and so the economic equation of the cost of rent is a key, perhaps the key component that they're initially seeking. But that for many people with a disability or lived experience of homelessness or unstable housing, that actually there's a variety of factors which lead to that instability beyond the economic. So whether it's a mental illness and it's a medication issue, whether it's complications of diabetes perhaps that have led to an amputation, there's many things that lead to instability in people's lives that some very modest amounts of support would actually overcome. It could be as simple as helping somebody find someone to look after their dog while they're going to be in hospital. And what our experience shows is that if we can provide very simple, incremental, mostly tenancy-related supports to our tenants, that they can avoid homelessness. And not just avoid homelessness, but actually contribute to creating a vibrant community. Because when people are able to live within a supportive environment that recognizes the complexity of their lives, they're actually able to move beyond the precarious nature of their housing situation to be able to seek recovery in other areas of their life. So the supports are difficult to describe in fine-grained detail, but it's as simple as looking after someone's pet to helping them find a new psychiatrist, helping them rebuild bridges with family, to helping them host a potluck supper. We had a tenant recently who she came to our staff and said, I've never actually made a friend. I'm in my 50s, I've lived in hospital, I've been isolated most of my life. I'm in my new apartment, and I'd like to make a friend. Can you help me figure out how to do that? So we started with, well, what if you invited somebody over for coffee? Well, I don't know how to make coffee. So we worked through that, and then by the end of the couple weeks period, the new tenant had gained the confidence to be able to say, knock on our neighbor's door and invite them over for coffee. And we see that kind of journey happening all the time, where people are able to rebuild the kind of stability that most of us take for granted, or the life skills or the abilities to be able to actually start participating actively in their community in a much broader way.
Thank you for that, and through the chair, this is so important. It's such an important message because we often talk about the need to address affordable housing, and often, and it's repeated consistently, and that is the segment of our population who need this type of support. And it's really encouraging to see that there is a model. Often it is closely linked to a spiritual component, and I think that that brings a different support to this particular initiative, but I support this initiative 100%, and as I said, it's so encouraging to hear that you're reaching out to that particular segment of our population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Graham. Reverend Klein, I got to give you an opportunity to speak. I thought you may. You don't even need the planner, you two guys, but you've got a good one there. But before I get to you, Reverend Klein, Graham, you operate a number of facilities in Ward 2 through you, Chair. I've never received a single call complaint, not related to parking, not related to a decrease in real estate values. You're a great operator. How do you guys do it? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair. fundamentally, we operate on the principle of love your neighbor as yourself. So we always put ourselves in the position of how do we want to be treated and how do we want our neighbors to be treated through our programs. And if that means dealing with an issue of a parked car, or if that means dealing with an issue of noise complaints, or if that means dealing with an issue of everything from cigarette butts on the sidewalk to how to find a psychiatrist is the kind of thing that we deal with on a daily basis. And fundamentally, we want our tenants to succeed, and we know that they will succeed when they have the stability in their life to be able to address very significant complexities. And most people have the abilities within them that may need to be found or fostered, and how do we help them achieve things? And so we fundamentally work with the principle of people have abilities and how do we develop those rather than a deficits-based approach. We're not unique in that. There's lots of other agencies and organizations in Hamilton that also contribute to people's wellness, and so often what we do is help bridge make the connections for people to another agency, Canadian Mental Health Association, the Good Shepherd. There's so many other organizations that do wonderful things. How do we help people make the connection to deal with their schizophrenia or to deal with their diabetes? And so those are the kind of relationships that we build with our tenants. We always say to tenants who are moving in, we're not a normal landlord, we're a very involved landlord. We ask questions like, what is your medical history? People don't have to tell us that they don't want to, but if they want the support, our tenants are very, very keen to share their experience because they know that they will find success, or that they have a very good chance of finding success living with us. And so it's through those relationships that we're able to deal with the complexities of life, whether it's the parking issues or the noise, or whether it's to deal with the interpersonal or the family relationships that tenants come with.
Who are the professionals in this particular case that you'll have available on-site supporting those housed in the 45 units?
We always have a community, we call it a tenant apartment support coordinator. Would be our full-time main contact on site. It's not 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support because people are living independently in their own homes, but that person is the main contact for all tenants there. We also have a 24-hour on-call service internally that people can, if they're needing sort of non-emergency related support, can call our support staff in-house. This isn't a group home, this isn't a care facility, this is an independent apartment building where people will be able to live their own lives. That being said, on our staff team, we do have 3 registered nurses who are familiar with mental health and other issues. We do have addiction support workers within our team. We have the knowledge within our team and within the community agencies we partner with to be able to address the vast majority of situations that people will deal with. Within our team, we have 77 staff at Indwell. We have a great deal of competency in managing the challenges people face and being able to help them find solutions. So while the team in this building will not have all of those expertise on site every day, those resources of our organization are available to the tenants in this building. And on top of that, of course, is the community support that Houston Street Baptist Church is offering to the community, because this is a housing program within a mixed-use building, but a mixed use that includes a faith community that's deeply committed to their neighborhood and has been for generations. Thanks,
Graham. Through you, Chair, to Reverend Klein, you've kicked off council probably more than any other person of faith, but and it's always inspiring, but you're very, very active and engaged, and Graham just alluded to it. In a nutshell, what have you been doing the last few decades in the North End, and brag a little bit about your reputation in the immediate area?
Yeah, so our church has been in the North End for 130 years. I've been the pastor of the church for the last 23 of those years, and we offer a variety of programs. So at Christmas, we offer hampers to over 300 families in our neighborhood, full toy shop, supports that are there. We offer a soccer league in the summer, 280 children playing in our soccer league this summer, predominantly run by volunteers. we see about 500 families a week in our ministries. We offer a hub, which is a place where immigrants and refugees gather. We offer, with North Hamilton in conjunction, a mental health wellness group for those that are Portuguese speaking. I don't run that. We offer a ministry on Friday morning where people can come, and our food bank is not a typical food bank. People sit around tables, they have coffee, they play Yahtzee, and then they come and say, I could use some help with groceries. So it's a socialization opportunity where people are befriended. Those are some of the things. A variety of youth ministries that we also run in the neighborhood that keep kids off the street, give them something healthy to do, that we run multiple times a week. We see over 100 youth every week, most of whom are not part of families who attend our church on a regular basis. You know, a handful of them would be, of the 100, there'd be about 12 of them. The rest of them are community youth that are coming. Now, out of that, some of them have started to attend the church. That's part of that. And so we offer a variety of sports and plan to do that in the building with the residents. A couple of things we've contemplated doing as we've talked to Indwell about what could happen is, you know, hosting community meals and dinners, having opportunities for people to come down where they can make a meal together, sit down and eat together, clean up together, and, you know, in the background, someone will be strumming a guitar, and, you know, somebody else can be reading poetry, or, you know, we haven't figured this all out yet, but those are things that we want to do to allow people to be able to have opportunities for socialization, building a friendship, and then because we're a church, we also offer for people the opportunity then to engage in study and understanding of who God is and how they can relate to Him. So that's something we'll do as well as people choose to want to be a part of that. So.
Great. About a few years ago, anyway, we had our first engagement session of many hours of engagement sessions with respect to the West Harbour developments. Mm-hmm. You were in attendance. I think you've attended more than I have. You've attended many. But I'll not forget seeing you there, and clearly something clicked that night. We had spoken that night. At the time, Paul Johnson was moderating and facilitating and said, you know, we have a commitment when all is said and done with the development in the setting sail secondary plan area, so from Cannon to the harbor, Wellington Street, all the way to the York Bridge, of committing to 100 to 200 new affordable housing units. Clearly, Reverend Klein saw the challenge was more immediate. We're a long way from even tackling Barton Tiffany, and we're just getting at Pier 8 right now, hopefully shovel-ready in a year or two. But your action, I think, probably began then. You started working with Indwell, Dwayne. We obviously did what we could. I did through my office. I have supportive letters in the breezes or attending your out of the required number of community meetings. You've gone well and beyond, and I was at one of those. Because you are helping us tackle at least that, and 100 to 200 probably isn't enough, you'll agree, but you're helping us in a big way with 45, not only 45 units, but supportive units. Right. Specific to that, though, you and your partner, Indwell, are also helping those in the immediate area. Can you speak to the immediate issue and how the 45 units, almost all of them, will be servicing those immediate neighbors?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, I've attended more West Harbour setting sail meetings than I thought were ever possible. Just so you know, over the last 15 years, did not anticipate I'd still be attending them at this time. And over, pardon? No, it hasn't sailed. As Councillor Farr said, as we heard the need, as we watched some things that were unanticipated, like the GO station being put into our neighborhood. I live in our neighborhood. We bought our house for $108,000, and last spring, when 5 people from Toronto on Murray Street sold and were bought by Torontonians, we were offered $749,000 for our house. And no, not yet. I told them I wanted $900,000. And but with that said, we recognize that as people were selling and neighbors were being displaced, specifically those that were living in rental units and being displaced across the city, that there was an opportunity for us to build something, and working with the city and with Indwell to be able to specifically have neighbors who needed supportive affordable housing. There is no supportive affordable housing in the North End, none. So neighbors that needed supportive affordable housing that were being displaced and moved out to be able to live there. So we've had people come to us saying, my son's autistic. You know, my daughter operates at a grade 7 level, and they could live independently with supports. We live here in the neighborhood. We'd love to have them in this building, and we're thrilled to be able to offer that and to be able to have neighbors whose support systems are there, with the North Hamilton Community Health Center right beside us. The Welcome Inn is there. The Rec Center is there. To have a number of supports working together with Indwell in the building, working with us toward a healthier, better neighborhood. And so our theme has been residents first. We're looking to see those that are being displaced and are struggling, that maybe are in affordable housing but could could use supportive affordable housing, be able to be a part of this facility with us, and more than that, be a part of this community with us.
And remain North End. Thank you very much, Dwayne. Thank you, Graham, and I appreciate the opportunity for the question.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To Reverend Klein, I kind of go by two axioms. The first is that the city is my church, and the second is don't tell me about your God, show me. So in this, you're certainly one of the first churches out of the gate from, I think, a burgeoning community here in Hamilton that are looking at this issue keenly. What types of conversations are you having now that you guys have actually put your oar in, have done a lot of the heavy lifting? Has there been conversations from other congregations, other denominations that are looking at this model to help with this process?
So through Madam Chair, both in our city and across the country, I had the privilege this year of speaking in 14 cities across our country in forums from 400 to a couple of thousand, and I've done that for a number of years now. And so both across our city, we're known as an entity in terms of our work with those that are more marginalized. This has escalated that opportunity when you're putting housing in. But so there's numbers of congregations across our city that are saying, how do we do this? How do we get involved? In other wards that some of you are saying you'd love to have this in your ward. And so we refer them to Indwell, but we're willing to meet with them in Indwell to talk about those conversations. But it's further reaching than just the city. There are now other groups across the country, literally, that are calling us saying, how do we become a part of this? How do we do that? We have this piece of land, wherever it is, Winnipeg, Toronto, and how do we provide supportive affordable housing? We're believing that in terms of the environmental efficiencies of this building and what this building will accomplish in terms of community use, residential, in a neighborhood where there's great supports for people that are requiring it, that this will be a model that people will come to Hamilton and look at across the city and then even across our province and country and say, we'd like to replicate this somewhere else.
Well, I know as we all try to tackle the mass complexity of the housing crisis that we're in right now, the seemingly commodification of our existence. I know you joked about the 900,000, but all of those things have real consequences as it relates to displacement. Through you, Madam Chair, to Graham. Graham, I know this language of housing with supports kind of buoyed on this housing first strategy. You guys are first out of the gate, it seems, with this long history of doing this work. What are you hearing now provincially in terms of this as being a model for our most vulnerable people?
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, the conversation around affordable housing is going on in every community, whether it's a small rural community like Norfolk County or Oxford County, where we also operate, or whether it's Toronto, which we had a call from 2 days ago. So we know that every community in our country is dealing with a complex issue. To Councillor Skelly's question earlier, the issue of supports is the most critical thing that we have realized from our experience. We're not saying every organization needs to provide support, but for many people who fall between the cracks of the affordable housing or the social housing system, whether it's addiction issues, a disability, simple lack of life skills, or no social connections, people are vulnerable and at risk. And when we can provide supports, that can be the catalyst for dramatic changes in success. For stable housing. And so we're seeing that, particularly for faith groups that are calling, and not just Christian faith groups, looking at housing with supports is something which is resonating with people. And there's a lot of complexity with that in terms of the funding model. None of the federal provincial programs are adequate for covering all the costs of any of these programs, and that's where it takes a community, the proverb could be changed, it takes a community to create an affordable housing project, because it's the private sector, it's the public sector, it's the community engaged volunteers, it's everyone who's part of this community that can contribute to the success of each other. And I think that that's an example. This building is already an example. It's not built yet, but it's already proving an example to other communities. Even a congregation in Ward 3 called this week, and we're getting together on Wednesday and talking with them about, hey, they heard about Houston, can we do something like this in our neighborhood? There was an article in the Spec a week ago about churches looking to developers to bail them out as they die. Those are not the churches that are calling us. The churches that are calling us are the churches who are strongly committed to their vision and mission and saying, what can we do because our community does not have solutions? And that's where we can come in.
I have to say that article totally got the story wrong. But I will say that from my experience, Madam Chair, the most egregious, horrific cases of landlord abuse and oftentimes illegal and undignified settings come from our populations that are so vulnerable They don't have people who are able to advocate for them. You talked about, folks that might be dealing with issues of criminality or addictions. The number one thing for people to get out of situations of desperation is to have connectivity to their community. Study after study after study shows that, so that language is quite right. I thank you so much for being before us, and just in close, Madam Chair, I also want to note the design elements that you bring when you talk about if it's, fit enough for me, or, I always say if my mother would be able to live in it, I'd be proud enough to have somebody else live in it. Often, I think, are comparable, if not surpass, some of the private developments that we have in this city. So thank you. The idea that it brings down housing values is ridiculous and hysterical and quite frankly, misguided. So I have certainly no problem. I would love to live next to a development like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and gentlemen, welcome, and thank you so much for your presentation. I'm a huge supporter of this, but I'm going to do what I usually do, and that's thump on the table about Flamborough. Have you had any connections with Flamborough? Have you spoken to any organizations up there? Can you speak to that with encouragement?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Partridge, we were very disappointed that a faith group in Flamborough took a different track a few years ago and decided to sell their property rather than talk to us first.
Yes.
And that was a significant loss to the community, a significant loss to the tenants who lived there. And again, it points to the issue of the market does not provide solutions for our most vulnerable people. So we have to take a different approach to addressing the needs for affordable housing. We should talk more specifically, perhaps in another context, about what specific needs you see emerging or existing in Flamborough, but there may well be a congregation there who is interested in doing something like this. And maybe Dwayne can talk to that.
Dwayne, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there's a couple of congregations of Flamborough we're closely tied to that are actually supporting this project.
Good.
So just, they've had me in to speak and to talk, they're supporting, and they're talking about how they might be able to do something like this. It's not immediate, but they're beginning to have those conversations. So I want to encourage you with that we're well connected to some of the faith communities there and having conversations with them.
So, Reverend, I very much appreciate that, and I wish that I had been pulled into that situation. I found out after the fact, which was unfortunate because, people talk about Flamborough and Waterdown being wealthy communities, but every community has their vulnerable people. Absolutely every community, and you cannot forget about them. And of course, one of the challenges that, that my residents face, as you well know, is a different kind of isolation. And when you live in the rural areas and you live in an urban area like Waterdown that is removed from the city geographically because of the escarpment, there's no connectivity there or little connectivity. And, it does put the vulnerable people up there at risk. And we do have growing areas of poverty. Seniors population is growing, and we started the Flamborough Women's Resource Center back in 2009 to be able to help women and their families with that isolation. I'm encouraged to hear that there's a couple of faith groups out there. My question, Reverend, have you met with the pastors group, our infamous pastors group?
I have not, but I'd be happy to come.
Yes, you will.
I have met with some of their pastors independently, but not with the group, but I'd be happy to come and do that.
Well, I am going to commit to working with you and doing some outreach there. The pastors get together every month, and there's a group of all of the pastors from the churches that are in the Flamborough community, and they do get together, and I know certainly Grace Anglican Church did step forward a few years ago to start the Waterdown Food Bank.
Yeah.
This council was able to provide some seed money so that they could have that food bank. It's right in the downtown core, the Flamborough Food Bank. I have to mention that. They have been stalwarts in our community, serving the more rural community. And, this is a conversation that it needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. And in fact, I think it should have happened a long time ago with that community and any rural community. My last question is, one of the things that we've really identified, Bethel Church is certainly one. They run a food preparation and cooking program. Are you aware of that?
Through Madam Chair, yes, I am, yeah.
Okay,
They have an
all
excellent
right.
program.
And when you spoke about the woman that didn't know how to make friends and asked for help, and then didn't know how to make coffee, and it reminded me of the people that I had the pleasure of visiting with who took part in the Bethel Cooking School. And it's run by volunteers, and they meet for 8 weeks, and they go through just understanding about food preparation, about healthy choices. They actually prepare the dinners every week. They prepare something and they eat together. They do the cleanup. They do exactly what you were talking about. And one of the things that's been identified in countless studies is many of our young people, and indeed men, single men, they don't know how to cook. They don't know how to prepare food. And we take that for granted as something that's so very basic. Could you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, through Madam Chair.
Experience?
Yeah, through Madam Chair. That's something that we have recognized as well, and so is one of the things that is high on our list to be able to assist with. We've referred a number of people in our community who are struggling that way to North Hamilton Community Health Center that runs a couple of excellent community kitchens, and so that's available to us. But we also see running some of that within our facility. I remember when I was a bachelor for a few years before I got married, right? Cooking a meal for yourself just seems, even if you know how to cook, just seems like a waste, right, of all that time and effort. And so to be able to do that in community will mean that people will have healthier choices and be able to, we think, have a better food portions and eat better. So we're looking forward to that. And I will just say through the chair to your previous comment, if any of you in any of your wards have faith communities that are interested in a project like this, we're actually recording much of what we've done. We're learning as we go along. And we'd be happy, Indwell and us, to be able to share this experience with any of them and be able to help them think through how a project like this can happen in your ward.
Really, really appreciate that, and I'll certainly do some outreach. I meet regularly with a lot of the faith groups in the community and the Flamborough Women's Center and early years and all of them, and get together a couple times a year to really talk about what can we do for our community. So God bless you all, and thank you very much. I'm hugely supportive of this, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Councillor Scully.
Thank you very much, and I do have a question. It's more along the line of the contribution of the faith of that community, and that is clearly the existing funding model doesn't work. You could not operate this. What are you tapping into volunteers? How are you sustaining this model?
Through you, Madam Chair, a very complicated but important question. The funding model from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, perhaps even into the 90s was very different than the current funding model for affordable housing today. The federal and provincial governments, while they have stepped back to the table somewhat, still provide much less than the actual cost of construction for new affordable housing, or new housing, period. So what we are constantly trying to do is basically cobble together whatever way we can the resources necessary to make every particular project possible. So that there's not one formula that says this is how to do it. Each project has its own business plan. In this particular case, we were very fortunate to receive $6.3 million through the Social Infrastructure Fund, which you reviewed in past some months ago. So that provides roughly 75% of the cost towards the housing portion. The remaining 25% of the housing-related costs, the church and the faith community that they're connecting to is stepping to the table and bringing to the project. Now, the church was going to build its own project anyway. They were going to build a new church on the site of the old Picton Library and such. So they already had a fundraising campaign underway, sort of in the works. That campaign has morphed and become larger, shifting from sort of $4.5 million to maybe 10 plus million. But again, those are huge numbers to try to go to the community and ask for support on. What we're realizing, though, is that people are desperate for solutions, whether it's the tenants we're looking for or whether it's our broader community. And that does include people with means who may run companies or have sold a property or what have you, who are deeply committed to seeing social good happen. We were very fortunate as an organization to recently receive a $2 million gift towards one of our projects. The George and Mary's project, which is currently under construction at Parkdale and Melvin. And that was from some folks who have been sort of tracking our progress for some time and are keen to see the kind of thing that we're doing continue. There's people out there with money who are interested in getting on board. We also do things like have people lend us money, simple promissory notes, someone who sold a home and they don't need that extra $100,000 that they made on it right now, but they can't give it to us because it's part of their retirement. And they loan it to us at interest-free or at very low interest. So there's 100 different ways that people are getting involved with what we're doing, with what Houston's doing. And I'll even say by extension to what other organizations are doing. I know we're not the only organization that's proposing new affordable housing, but this is where I think as a community, and perhaps as a challenge to you as council, there's an opportunity for us as a community to take leadership on bringing our federal and provincial money to Hamilton. But we need to be ready. We need to have these kind of projects on the table, in the docket, sort of in the back pocket even. You know, we need to have projects ready to go. So when the feds or the provinces purse strings do get loosened slightly, whether it's because of an election coming or because of whatever reason, that we're ready to go. And I think it's when we have projects like this in mind, the community can get behind them.
Thank you for that. You mentioned 6.3 through the chair. Is that capital funding?
That is capital funding.
Through the chair, in terms of operating, and I have a faith-based, at least one, nursing home and retirement residence in my community, and clearly it is the volunteering and the philanthropic component that sustains a very high-end level of service. My question to you is, through the chair, is it that philanthropic, that faith-based component that really is sustaining these models, and without it, that the funding isn't there? I mean, I couldn't imagine the city of Hamilton being able to do what you're doing with the dollars you're using, that there's another component coming to the table, and is it the volunteer component?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. People are motivated by many different reasons, whether it's their faith or whether it's their social conviction or whether they've experienced it and they're paying it forward. We have over 450 volunteers a month who participate in our programs across our organization. I know the church has hundreds of volunteers as well, and we could not do this without volunteers. You're right, people don't volunteer for the city the same way they volunteer for other organizations, which is another reason why partnering is a good way to do it, to do these kinds of things. I think that people are looking to be a part of things that are working, and people like to participate where they feel valued. And I think a lot of our volunteers see that. They see the direct impact that they can have on somebody's life by being a part of this. And then, of course, on a financial side of things, that does lower the costs of doing what we do.
Thank you. You know, we can never underestimate the value, the dollar value of volunteers. I mean, from what you're providing to something that we forget about. My kids were in minor hockey, and you couldn't run a program. You couldn't possibly afford to run those programs without volunteers. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, everyone. And now just a few comments. Thank you. And George, you did an excellent job.
Yeah,
I had to put that in.
Give me a planning question.
And, but
I earned my pay.
You have talked to those guys. So I just wanted to say, you know, it's amazing, and I appreciate the comments all around that have been made. You know, we certainly take for granted on a daily that, you know, it's a simple issues that can be actually very devastating and very difficult for somebody with even if they don't have a mental challenge that, or a physical challenge, that can be very debilitating for a person. So to know that there's areas out there to assist them. I have to say I pass by the two facilities almost daily on Main Street, and you know, I miss some of the patrons because they do stand outside once in a while, and I do miss seeing them because you see a sort of a habit of seeing certain people and enjoying the outdoors, which is great. And but I've never seen any issues at all. They're immaculate along the frontages and the side and what I see, and it's always a pleasure driving by there. Last comment, you're absolutely correct with regards to projects being ready, and I've certainly stressed with the staff, you know, when we get the P3 funding potentials coming down, you know, why aren't we having our capital projects ready to go? I mean, this started back in the 90s. So you're absolutely right, and I think with more and more of your projects coming forward, we're creating templates that can make them go through a process faster, just as this one has. So certainly great comments and super service. Thank you so much. With that, everyone, can I have a motion to receive the agents and delegates presentation? Councillor Farr, Councillor Skelly, all in favor? Now, I have, I'm going to turn to, thank you everyone, members of the public wishing to speak to this issue. This will be your opportunity. I'm going to ask, I have 3 registered speakers, so I will turn to them first, and I'm going to ask when the speakers come down to please enter your name, address, and telephone number on the book provided. So I'm going to call Laurie James. Please come down. I'm going in order, ma'am, of, are you Laurie James?
Beatrice Jeffrey, and my name is Val.
Okay, that's fine. I agree, but I have 3 registered speakers first, and then we'll open it up. You will come. Thank you. Laurie James, come on down.
I'm afraid to speak into this microphone because Dwayne said he had strep throat. So I'm like, okay, if I step away from it, can you hear me? I hope so. Anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, chair, planning staff, city staff, and general public. My name's Laurie James. We actually have the building just to the north of the proposed development. And like everyone else here, I've been involved with the City of Hamilton politics for far too long. My parents live in Judy's ward, and they've been there since I was 17, and now I'm almost 60, so it's quite some time. I came to Hamilton myself personally at 2000 and bought this building. I was really excited about it. I thought this is going to be great. Mom and Dad are getting older. I can move my business, Banff Designs, to Hamilton. I can be close to them. I can take care of them. I've had a business that I'm different from being in the poverty business. I've been in the jobs business my whole life and had over 1,500 immigrants come through my facility and train them and employ them and launch them into amazing things, amazing lives. I'd hoped to do something similar in Hamilton, but I got hamstrung by the city bylaw people, and they started in 2004 trying to kick out the thrift shop, which is a really comparable complement to what these guys are planning. I'm totally in support of what they're doing. We've had a lot of great meetings, and long before I even knew Graham or met the Indwell people, I was actually, I'm a great social media girl. I love Facebook, and I love all the new ideas that come up, and I was posting all about what they were doing in terms of their open for business attitude in Hamilton. And the one thing I must say in addressing you all today is I am thrilled to bits to see the open for business attitude in Hamilton. When I started my business, I started in an area of Toronto, which was just called the Warehouse District. It was very much like a lot of areas of Hamilton here, had to be there because of the low rent. I think we started off paying $125 in the furnace room and gradually moved it to be a 22,000 square foot facility, and we were very successful. We didn't have a name then. We do now. It's called Liberty Village. So we're very involved in working with the planners, and hence my associate here, Berardo Massioli, who we'll speak to later, who is a planning consultant, and I met him through those years. You guys have a name. I guess you call it Jamesville, which is wonderful, so you're a step ahead. Some of the things that we looked at, though, when we were coming through these things, and I think that I don't know how we're going to how we can integrate them in at this late time, because in speaking to a few people, I know that the funding model, you have to act fast to get the funding model. But I don't know where, do you have that picture up, Berardo? No, not yet. If you'll look at what we've given you as a circulation, some of the new developments that we see in the city, they're corner developments like the Houston Street Baptist Church. And the Houston Street Baptist Church, it looks great. But it's on a corner. It's like the gateway to the harbor. It is the gateway. We have gateways to Liberty Village. This is the gateway to the harbor. And I think it's really important that you pay attention to that in terms of the physical structure. In terms of a community, what do you... Okay, Ida, okay. Yeah, in terms of a community that is about to be built, that is going to be there for a long time. Graham has indicated that, it's a 20-year development and like 20-year funding model that they've got happening. And I think if you look at some of the detail of the drawings that or the photographs that I've given you, I think that the corner could be just a lot better. And my own personal opinion is, showed Steve Robichaud earlier with his little blocks up there. I said, if you just flip the building 90 degrees, so if you put the church down Picton and you had the development of the residential homes on James Street, you'd have an amazing corner. And is that the one, Berardo? No, that's not the one.
We've got 4 of them.
Yeah, no, I like the NW one. So the one I like the best is actually this one here. I just think it's amazing. It's got a lovely corner, and that could be the entrance to the church. I know that you're putting this on that H zone, like H holding pattern. So it means, I know a lot of work has been done, but I think that if you made this have a little bit more impact, it could be phenomenal. The second thing that personally I think should happen is to make it a livable, walkable community. I mean, the big word is community, is that it should jump up 1 floor so that you have retail on that side that the church is on. I just think that in terms of where the property is located, and I think in terms of all the planning and effort that has gone into the setting sail plan, that I know you're short on time with respect to getting the funding, and I don't know how you could change it at this late date. We discussed this with Graham earlier and with Dwayne and Paul, but I think that in terms of the fact that it's going to be here for a long time, and I've said to Jason Thorne before, you've got a slate. You have got an open canvas here in Hamilton, and it's a really good opportunity to make more than what's going on here, which is a lot already, and it's very positive, but you've got a really good opportunity to make a good-looking, livable, walkable community with more amenities for the people that live there, like one of the things you were just saying at the library, like a bank. They closed the bank down the street. And maybe that's where you could go. I mean, it's a stretch. Once you've got a formula that works, you just keep it going. So to add something else, which is like a commercial element to it, might be a little bit difficult, but I think you could go into partnership because you need money for long-term funding. You could go into partnership with, say, for example, a bank and say, could we have your charitable donations? Could you please give us, $500,000 a year to fund our operation, and also, you can have your bank on the corner here, and it would be great. So, just in summary, I'm going to let Berardo speak. I think, I don't know how you could do it at this late date. I don't know how you could do it, but I would hope that maybe some creative minds could come forward and help with that. But that's all I have to say, and I'm going to introduce you to Berardo Mascioli and.
Okay, first I'm going to ask the committee, is there any questions of the presenter? Move to receive. Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Thank you. Laurie and Berardo, you've signed in.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll
This is
sign in.
Berardo Mascioli of Strategia Consulting Limited, 215 Roncesvalles Avenue, Toronto.
No problem. Good morning, Chair, members of the Planning Committee, members of the public. I've been working with Ms. James actually for some time now with regards to some of the planning issues with regards to her property at 520. This opportunity has come up in the interim period. And we've had excellent conversations on occasions here with the proponents, and I want to thank the proponents and also to the local councillor for assisting us with addressing some of the site plan concerns as we go forward, particularly the issue of the privacy fence. If I could just speak a little bit to that so you'll understand when this matter goes to council next week, I believe, with regards to the enabling bylaw. The concern we had with regards to privacy fence was be along the northern boundary between the two properties was one of ongoing operations, maintenance, and safety and security. We're in favor of the planting strip, and we agree with the planning recommendations with regards to that, but the privacy fence was an additional step that we thought that would actually impact the properties negatively. Very quickly, because the adjacent property owner to North, Lori James, has very clearly explained her interest. Her proposal was to elevate the project. Let's add another floor. Under your setting sale plan and under the secondary plan, with the mixed uses that are supposed to be coming forward, the hope was, and was expressed a few times with the proponents, that it would be nice to have additional commercial activity happening along here as well. So we're here saying we're completely in support with what we have here. We just wish that we could put in an additional floor of commercial activity to help with local employment opportunities, to establish a retail presence along James Street, and to continue the retail fabric along James Street going forward. I appreciate the time is short. I don't know if that opportunity is still available to us, but that is a big part of what we're looking for. I'm available for any questions that you may have, but I think that Ms. James has covered most of the matters. I thank once again the local councillor for assisting us with the proponent to deal with our concerns with regards to the site matter.
Thank you. Any questions to the presenter? Seeing none, and I just will comment that I'm going back to Councillor Farr at the end for an amendment with regards to the fencing issue that you raised. Councillor Farr, got that on the record. Motion to receive, moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Green. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Carried. Ron Fiedler, come on down. Ron, if you want to start and sign in after, that's fine. Rob, sorry, Rob.
All right, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to address you. I'll keep my comments very short. I submitted a letter which is in the record, and it covers more extensively what I think. But today I'm here as a resident, and I'm here to support Houston Street Baptist and Indwell and their project. I live at 78 Simcoe Street East, which is 2 blocks to the south and 2 blocks to the east. I have a child that goes to the Bonetto School. I am not a member of the church, but my daughter is friends with Dwayne's children who are her classmates, and she has attended a day camp at the church during the summer and so forth. When this proposal first came forward, I was a member of the Neighborhood Association board, and I spoke in favor of it at the first community meeting for it. I also attended all of the West Harbor community update meetings that were to do with what was happening down on the waterfront and other changes in the area, which is where I think this proposal originally came from. Because I knew before that the church had already had approval to build something on the property they owned, like build a new church facility. So this really arose, the supportive housing part of it arose out of seeing need. So anyone who knows Pastor Klein knows he's very involved, knows that he would have been aware of many of these issues for a long time before that. But I think because so many people showed up at these meetings, all raising this issue, it went up in urgency and produced a desire to see if there was some tangible way to contribute to ameliorating the problem. So this is not a solution in the sense of all needs are met. This is doing what you can with the opportunity you have. And so for me, it's important to be here to say as a resident, I support it. That I supported it when it was first proposed. I'm happy with the process that has moved forward in terms of addressing the various, there were many concerns raised and many of them have been addressed. There are some that can't be addressed. But I'm satisfied that this process has went about as well as you could expect. I'd also like to say that there's a certain amount of leadership that is required on a file like this that's very complicated. I watched John Tory on a video clip at council talking about a shelter somewhere in Toronto where I think after hearing many objections, he finally said, look, if you say no to it here, then every other place will be empowered to say no to something. So it's really important that a community says, we need a certain balance as we go forward, that we look at not where we are, maybe not even where we were, but where we're going. What kinds of needs do we need in the future? What's our housing mix going to look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line? And we know changes are happening. We know that the housing stock is changing. We know that the city has big plans down on the waterfront. We know there are changes afoot at Jamesville and 500 McNabb. And this is one piece of that larger change, and it targets a very specific housing need that is not well addressed. Even in the existing situation, if you just expanded the affordable housing we have, it doesn't address this particular type. And so I'm very grateful to hear the support at council, and I'd also like to thank my own councillor, because I've seen him at public meetings really stick his neck out. There are people, and I understand, especially if you live very close to a project, that there are concerns that you have that are much more specific and intense than someone like me who lives, say, 2 blocks away. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions of the presenter? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Green.
Thank you. Just as somebody from the outside, and to echo your points about Councillor Farr's work, Rob, I know that you guys sit in a lot of meetings together, and from the outside, I just want to make a quick comment, Madam Chair, that I always see Rob's engagement as being thoughtful, thorough, looking at all sides of the coin, and I just wanted to appreciate him for his continued engagement in these matters, both officially in the neighborhood level, but also personally. It certainly it makes a difference, and I just appreciate you for taking time to be here today and also acknowledging the complexity of these files when dealing with sometimes, often hardcore NIMBYism. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Farr?
I've got to thank Rob as well. No question, he covers usually what he needs to cover in a much more eloquent and in a more timely fashion than I usually do. But he's a planner by trade. A recent, you got your doctorate now, is it? You got your doctorate just the other day, right? And I'm trying to get him to help the Ward 2 office on another very prevalent housing issue in which we're faced with, and a lot of talk, especially lately in Ward 2, with respect to family-friendly sized units, which we have a bit of a crisis in, and we're addressing specifically in some areas of the ward. But as Rob alluded to in his brief delegation, it's important to think ahead, and certainly that's something that he does, and in an eloquent way. So thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate the delegation here today and your ongoing engagement, and I look forward to working with you on the child and family-friendly sized units in the future.
Thank you. So moved to receive by Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Skelly. All in favor? Come on down.
I come here because I am one of the last
Can I
board
get your name for the record?
Beatrice Jeffries.
Thank you, Beatrice. And you've signed in already?
Yes, I have.
Thank you.
I'm one of the last board members of North End Residents Organization. This was an organization that came about because of urban renewal, which was tearing our houses down left, right, and center. Their idea was to put high-rises. But when the City of Hamilton residents saw Ken Sobel and Marina Towers built, they had so many people come forward, demanded that it be stopped because you were ruining the view from Sam Lawrence Park of the Bay. So they had a 3-story moratorium put on North End, nothing to be built over 3 stories. Recently, along comes an organization called Setting Sail, who are building below grade, 10 feet at least, at the bayfront, and they want 4 stories. So we come to this development of the Baptist Church. Now you look at their development, It's 4 stories plus something on top. It's elevators, whatever. So it's no longer 4 stories, it's 5. Now, across the road, that whole corner block has been sold to a Toronto developer. He's already been asking for 16 Picton Street. He's not getting it yet. The next corner, another housing project. That's at Ferry and James Street, all on James Street. If all of these places start building with up to 5 stories, and then you do it again across the road at the old provincial housing project, which we call the survey, then you have lost that view that all those residents fought for. I think it is wrong, and you should not allow it. Why can't Indwell build on top of the church and bring it down to 3 stories? Why does it have to be 4? I don't like the idea of Indwell. It's too close to schools. And while they do tell you they work with low-income people, we all know they're recovering addicts, as well as diabetics, as well as this, as well as that. They're too close to the schools. The Baptist church uses the school grounds, and they use a lot of parking. You saw that in their, when you saw the corner. It was filled with parking. Where are they going? Where are they going when they don't have it when Indwell comes in? They say they're going to walk over to the health center. They are at present in the school, Bonetto School. Now, Bonetto School has a policy, don't park in the schoolyard. But the Baptist church parks there because the principal is a member of them. She said you could. But it's a no-no because of the tree, one of the last trees. But anyway, the parking lot is across the road, and they wouldn't even walk across the road to go to the school for their, here again. You have them saying one thing, doing another. The same with Indwell. I don't disagree that the church does lots of good things for their parishioners. But to teach people cooking when the health center does that, and Welcome In does that, how many duplicates of service do we need? It isn't that I'm against Indwell so much, because they say they are responsible for their people inside the building, not outside. And we can always call police. We're quite capable. But it is the height. You keep building higher and higher, and there goes the view of the bay. This is very prized by Hamiltonians. It's used over and over again, not only in the Spectator, but in every blurb that Hamilton puts out for advertising. It's that view. It is magnificent. But you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it because you allow this people to build what they want to build. And you've got the one at the, by the way, at the waterfront. Nobody ever dug in that ground. Mikasa Lodge was on top of the ground. Their basement was on top of the ground. There are underground streams.
Yes, thank you, Beatrice. It's through the chair. Can't direct it to a councillor. Thank you.
Well, I address him because it's his development. It's his.
Beatrice, yeah, just his comments. Thank you.
It's his responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay? And that's what I have to say. You've got to stop the height from going up and up. And that's what's happening here. And you'll lose it. But then, once it's gone, it's gone.
Any questions of the presenter? Thank you. I'm moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Farr to receive. I'm going to ask Tiffany if I could, because I know in Stoney Creek we have the same issue. 4-story includes the HVAC, correct? Because if it doesn't, it has to be considered a 5th story, and it should be reflected in the application.
Should only be 3.
Sorry, this is a 4-story development, 14 meters in height.
Which includes the HVAC, so it can't be another story on top after.
Through the chair to the councillor, it's my understanding, and we can clarify this, that zoning bylaw number 653 does not include mechanical equipment in the elevator shaft as part of that 4-story height, but it doesn't then deem it to be a 5-story building.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so it's moved to receive. That's done. With that, I'm going to, is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Are you coming forward to speak, ma'am? Are you? No. Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Come on down.
Okay, finished.
Thank you, Beatrice. You can sign in after if you want to speak now, and you're just put your name forward for the record.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of council, members of public. Thanks for having me speak this morning. I'll keep it pretty brief. My name is Justin Abbas. I live at 1 Picton Street West, so directly across the street from the proposed development. My wife and I bought our house just a year ago, about 1 year ago now. We're immensely proud of being Hamiltonians. I moved away from Hamilton about 10 years ago, and the lure of Hamilton brought me back. We're immensely proud that Hamilton puts its community first, and I think the proposed development and the vision of the Houston Baptist Church and Indwell taking a community-first approach is really inspiring, and to see something like that built right across the street from us as property owners, we're inspired by it. To touch just briefly on the real estate value, I've never really looked into the historicals, as some people have mentioned that they're afraid it might lower the real estate value. I think if we were to come across the same property a couple years later, we would be inspired even more to live in the neighborhood. So just, that's more of an anecdotal, but from a wanting to be a part of the community, that's very inspiring to us. I'm a local business owner. My wife is finishing up her degree at McMaster in nursing. Just listening to Indwell speak and the Houston Baptist Church speak, it makes me want to get involved in the project, and I actually didn't know the full extent that the church played in the community, so I'm really inspired by hearing some of the stories this morning. And yeah, so obviously I'm in support of the project, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. We'll be sure to sign in. Councillor Farr, question of the presenter?
Justin, a late welcome to Ward 2 from Councillor Farr. What's your line of work? What business did you start here?
I'm a co-owner in a local coffee roastery, Coffeecology, and more recently online grocery store, Bikeables. We're trying to support local food vendors in our city.
I think you had a recent opening on Vine Street that I missed, so I owe you one there for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And secondly, I really appreciate, as an immediate neighbor, your inspiring words. Where'd you grow up in the Hammer, through you, Chair? Was it the North End that you came back to?
Through you, Madam. I actually grew up just outside of Hamilton, Caledonia, but spent a lot of time, obviously, in Hamilton, growing up in Caledonia.
Okay, well, we won't hold that against you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great neighborhood, and you epitomize generational North Ender with your words and your commitment to community. So I really do appreciate those comments. Thank you very much. I'll receive all.
Thank you. Move to receive. Councillor Farr, Councillor Green, all in favor. Justin, please remember to sign in. And you make note, you have another volunteer. Excellent. Thank you. So with that, do we have any other speakers here now? If not, I will be closing off to the floor. That'll be it as far as the delegations and presentations today on this particular application. So closing off to the floor. Thank you, everyone. Coming back into committee, I'm going to ask that we have a motion to approve the staff report with the amendment to reflect that the correspondences received did not affect the decision, and I'm going to turn to Councillor Farr for an amendment.
Right, so I'll move that, and then the amendment on changing the 1.8 meter fence to a, through you to staff, I think it was a planter. Is there dimensions on the planter?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the planting strip
will remain. It's already part of the proposal,
Okay.
and a reduction in the width of the planting strip is part of the draft bylaw.
So remove the fence.
So it's just removing the fence
Okay.
component completely.
And that's seconded by Councillor Skelly.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder to the amendment. All in favor? Carried. On the recommendation as amended, moved by Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Skelly. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Going to go back now. Don't want to forget, because Sam has been so patient sitting here. Councillor Marula. I'm just going back. Sorry. Well, let me just read for the public record. This is item 6.6 is the application for amendment to the City of Hamilton zoning bylaw number 6593 for lands located at 52 to 64 Ottawa Street, North Hamilton, PED 17120, Ward 4. Can I read it off as the public
absolutely.
portion?
Yep.
Thank you. So members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton. Before council makes a decision regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, the person or public body is not entitled to an appeal in the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OMB unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So I'm going to go out to the public. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this particular item with regards to Ottawa Street North? Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this item with regards to Ottawa Street North? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Thank you. I can close off to the floor. I'm sorry, you're move off. Yes, Councillor. So I'm going to ask that we have a motion to close off the floor. I'm sorry, we don't have quorum. We don't have quorum. Councillors, we don't have quorum.
Sorry, Doug. Sorry to interrupt. There's no quorum.
Now have quorum. Thank you, everyone. So can you move to close off to the floor and to waive the staff presentation? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Councillor Marula, did you wish to comment on this, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank Denise Christopherson and the YWCA. We went through an exhaustive process in communicating with the public through my town hall meetings as well as through the hubs themselves. And I think it shows the fact that no one is here today, that we crossed our T's, dotted our I's. And I just want to thank again Denise, YWCA. It's an exciting project that ties into the renaissance that both Councillor Green and I are experiencing. And I want to thank Councillor Green as well for his involvement, being that this is located on the border of Wards 3 and 4, and will obviously service the entire area. Having said that, I do want to amplify the fact that when it comes to affordable housing in the East End, we are definitely leaders and something that I take a great deal of pride in. I know that it's become cool lately to support affordable housing, but I remember a time back in 2005, 2006 when it wasn't so cool, and I still have the scars from it, but I'm glad I stuck to my guns, and I can assure you that if it wasn't for the residents who gave us such a hard time, we wouldn't have really a platform to be able to build upon. Because today, because of the successes of yesterday, we now can use those frames of reference to justify the continued growth in the affordable housing file. And for that, I want to thank not only the residents that gave us a hard time, but today's residents who are supporting most projects that are coming forward. And as a result, I just want to commend them publicly and thank staff as well. Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. I had Councillor Skelly. I just want to be sure, though, is the applicant here in the audience? Yes, you're here. Did you wish to comment? You're satisfied with the recommendations? Everything's good. Thank you. So I have Councillor Skelly and then Councillor Green.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate the Y. My relationship with that particular location goes back many, many, many years. I lived actually about 3 doors down from Councillor Marula. We didn't know each other at the time, but spent a lot of time at the Y. My kids actually learned how to swim there, and they played gymnastics and volleyball, and I ate at the restaurant and the whole bit. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I love to see the fact that it's grown. And I also wanted to just make a point. I normally, I spend a lot of time on Ottawa Street because I upholster, and so I get all my fabric there. But I cannot get over the change in Ottawa Street. It is such an amazing, dynamic community. It has really, really come a long way. It looks fabulous. And this is only going to bring even more to the community, so congratulations to you.
Councillor Green?
Thank you very much. And much like my comments to the previous presentation that was here, you know, we have such complexity with housing and the work that the YWCA is doing, supported by members of this council. I know both Councillor Marula and Councillor Farr are going to bat trying to find the extra dollars to make these processes work. It's incredible to see kind of what's planned for this particular location and what it's going to mean, I think, for the whole strip. And much like what we saw here with Indwell, the YW has certainly been leaders in our vulnerable women's segment of our community, half the population, obviously, some of the most vulnerable people in our city. So hats off to Councillor Marula, always fearless and tenacious. And I think what we're seeing now since 2005 is an evolution of empathy and compassion and understanding in our neighborhoods that are based in values that I'm certainly proud to be a part of, and has certainly been, I think, a 20-year process for Sam over there in Ward 4 leading the way. So hats off to you. I know you got a lot of different exciting housing projects coming online, and I just want to take a moment to congratulate you on your leadership. Certainly something we'll be emulating in Ward 3.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to recognize the board members from the YWCA and the staff who are here as well. I've been part of this organization for, I think, the last 20 years and served on the board as vice president many years ago. And in fact, at that time, we discussed this location and the need for, some additional housing for women and just all of the issues in that. And hats off to Denise as well, Christofferson. It really takes people to just continually champion. They've been consistent, they've been on message, and they've done so much for the community and for reaching out to the other partners as well. They're very supportive of all of the organizations that really help women and their families and men as well. So I'm just absolutely thrilled that this has finally come to fruition after all those years ago. We just never thought, that it would happen. And I'm talking 15 years ago. So, I appreciate the work that the board does and staff as well. And thank you to the good Councillor Marula for being a consistent champion. And that's what organizations like the YWCA need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. So with that, can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation before us? Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Green. And may the record also show that the submissions did not affect the decision, correct? Madam Clerk, you have that? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. With that closes off the public delegation applications. We have item 7.1 is Bill 139, Building Better Communities and Conserving Watersheds Act 2017, Ontario proposed changes to the land use planning appeal system. I did ask staff to bring a presentation forward, and we can have just a quick overview because there are major changes that the province is proposing. Thank you, Sam. And so I'm going to call Joanna Weiss down from our legal division. It's still morning. Good morning, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair. And yes, it is morning still, very briefly. I'm here actually also with Ms. Fayback today to give you a brief overview of this new bill that was introduced at the end of May and allow you to ask any questions you may have of the report that you have. So as you will recall, last year the province published a review consultation document that asked a number of questions of people who would like to make submissions, and Ms. Hickey-Evans and I reported on that last year, and submissions were made to the province. The submissions that were adopted were filed on December 19th, which was the cutoff to provide comments to the province on some of the reforms that they were suggesting. But this is not the first time. We've, in the past, done a number of reviews of planning regime and also of the appeals process, and there had been a number of instances where the city had provided comments to the province about the system. And so about almost 6 months later, on May 30th, Bill 139 was introduced, the Building Better Communities and Conserving Watersheds Act 2017, and it received first reading. So essentially it was just introduced at the legislature. In essence, because it's a fairly lengthy bill, it contains 3 parts. So it does contain the OMB reform materials and changes that are being proposed by the province, but it also included some planning changes that aren't specifically related to the OMB reform, and Ms. Fayback will discuss that, but there was also the Conservation Authority changes, and as you will recall, as part of GIC, that piece of the bill was hived off because it related to other comments the city had made, and so on, I believe, June 21st, that had already gone to GIC, so you will recall that component of it, and that will not form part of the presentation or the report that you have. This bill at this time is not law. All it is a bill that has received first reading, so it is possible that the bill be amended through as it proceeds through the legislature, and they have asked for comments on Schedule 3 in terms of the OMB and the planning portion of it. The bill overall, just at a high level, is a very technical bill. It is following a newer tradition of legislative drafting that's a little difficult to read, so it's something that everyone is sort of digging their teeth into still. So the Act portion of the bill is only 3 sections that direct that the schedules to it give rise to the changes. So 5 schedules are essentially the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act 2017. That is the act that replaces the OMB Act. Schedule 2 creates a new act, the Local Planning Appeal Support Center Act. Schedule 3 are the changes to the Planning Act as well as City of Toronto and the Ontario Planning and Development Act. And Schedule 5 are sort of technical changes to sort of update terminology. So any reference to the Ontario Municipal Board would be to this new tribunal. So to start off with the OMB reform piece, the December submissions that the city made, I would say, are largely incorporated into what we've seen in the bill. But the bill is really a fundamental change to the planning appeals process that we've been using since the inception of the Planning Act. As you will have heard in the news, the Ontario Municipal Board will be no more, but it will become this new body, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, the LPAT. The intent, it would seem from this bill, is to really vest the decision with the municipality and direct more authority to be given back to municipal councils in making determinations of planning matters within the municipality, and really do what perhaps Bill 51 wasn't able to do, which is create this appeals body into more of a real appeal body rather than what we have now, which is a de novo type hearing process. The LPATA, so the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act, is similar to the Ontario Municipal Board Act, but what it does is it makes more specific requirements of that tribunal to be much more, the process is more described, there's more procedures, there's going to be requirements for case management in all of certain processes and encouraged for others. It's going to limit the types of evidence that can be given at certain types of hearings, such as oral evidence at certain hearings. And there is provision that there will be a regulation that deals with the timelines. So perhaps the timelines of the process, but it may also speak to the timelines that decisions are made. Those regulations, the proposed regulations, have not been released. It's a little early in the process for that, and certainly this new tribunal would have to create a rule set. So there's a lot of unknowns in terms of how the process will actually unfold, but what we know from the new legislation that is there is that the process is significantly different than the current process. The creation of the Local Planning Appeal Support Center is something that comes along the lines of the comments that had been made to the province about making the process more accessible to people who may not have the access to legal or planning advice to help them engage with the process. So this new support center is going to be tasked with giving information and guidance on land use appeals, and what that legislation is proposing is that it create eligibility criteria. So we don't know at this point what that criteria might be, and we don't know what level of funding they'll receive. So there's a lot of things that would have to happen after this legislation is enacted to see how this support center might support communities. In terms of the changes to the Planning Act, there are quite a number of new limits on what can be appealed. So there will be no appeals where the minister approves plans or amendments. There will be limits on the appeal of secondary plans before their second anniversary. There will be restrictions on the appeals of interim control bylaws. Appeals will have a new attest applied to them, and that essentially is whether the decision that you might make is consistent with provincial policies and conforms to provincial plans. Although, as you'll hear from Ms. Fayback, what is a plan or policy is going to be expanding. And certainly if the tribunal hears that or determines that it was inconsistent or didn't conform, it would be sent back to council for a second decision, which is also provided for in the Act. You will have 90 days to make that second decision. And essentially that point would be to look at what the board found to be inconsistent or non-conforming and perhaps revise or update that decision to then go potentially back to the board, because there is another appeal right after that second decision is made. Again, this all would be subject to a transition regulation that hasn't been released, so it's not clear what applications may be captured by the new process and what will still continue under the old OMB process. I know the City of Toronto actually passed a motion making a request of the province that that cutoff time be the date of first reading, so May 30th, so that there was no, I guess, last-minute applications that are being put forward to get out of the new changes if they were to be enacted. So in terms of the planning changes.
Good morning. So as Ms. Weiss mentioned, Bill 139 is proposing additional changes to the Act that go above and beyond any type of OMB reform. And these relate to decision timeframes, deemed policy statements, climate change, higher order transit, and secondary planning. So with respect to decision timeframes, as you're all very much well aware, there are certain timeframes under the Act in which Council needs to make a decision, and what the Bill 139 is looking at is extending some of those decision timeframes. So for an official plan amendment, it's proposing an extension from 180 to 210 days. And for a zoning bylaw amendment, it is looking at extending it from 120 to 150 days. It also has a new provision that relates to joint applications. So when there's a joint official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application, the time frame to make a decision is going to be extended from 180 days to 210 days. But there's an interesting caveat in there that they have to be submitted at the same time. So if we're still not sure how some of that would affect implementation, but our initial read is if they were to make an application or if an official plan amendment, let's say, was to be identified at a later date, that time frame may not apply. Staff are generally supportive of extending decision timeframes, but we do have a couple of other concerns. They did not include plans of subdivision, which would currently stay at 180 days. And then I'm not sure if Planning Committee remembers, but last year when Bill 73 received royal assent, it allowed for a one-time 90-day extension for official plan amendments. So that would still remain. So that would mean that official plan amendments would be up to 300 days. So you can get a sense that now there's a whole bunch of different timeframes, and they all are extremely different. And so our recommendation is that there should be one consistent timeframe, that plans of subdivision should be extended, and that the 90-day one-time extension that exists for official plan amendments be extended to include both zoning bylaw amendments and plans of subdivision, just to make things a little bit clearer, more consistent, easier for staff, and easier for the public to understand. Deemed policy statements. So Bill 139 is proposing changes that would expand matters of provincial interest, and it would include policy statements issued by the Ministry of Transportation under the Metrolinx Act, respecting transportation within the regional transportation area, and they define that as being the cities of Toronto and Hamilton, and the regions of Durham, Peel, York, and Halton, and also policy statements issued by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change under the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act, respecting resource recovery and waste reduction, would also be deemed to be a matter of provincial interest. So the proposed change by the bill, what it does is it has the effect of elevating the status of these plans to be matters of provincial interest, which in the province's mind is I would say their most important, or some of their most important areas of interest. Staff do note that it does raise some questions for us as far as the planning process, and is planning and the development approvals process, let's say, the best and most appropriate way to implement these plans, and what if there are any inconsistencies, and do they align? So we have some questions around that. With respect to climate change, the Bill 139, is proposing changes that would require official plans to contain policies relating to climate change. These policies would be mandatory, so all official plans would be required to include policies that relate to climate change, and these policies can only be appealed by the minister. The policies will need to identify goals, actions, and objectives that would relate to mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that we're adapting to a changing climate. These proposed changes are to support the Ontario's Climate Change Action Plan, which has elevated greenhouse gas emissions and climate change to be matters of provincial interest. So generally, staff are in support, but we'd sort of have to see how that would affect our current official plan policies and what changes we might need to make. Bill 139 also is focusing on higher order transit, stations, and stops. So there are some proposed changes that state that an official plan may contain policies regarding higher order transit stations and stops. These would be discretionary, so municipalities would get to choose if they wanted to include these policies, and they, again, would only be able to be appealed by the minister. The changes state that if the official plan has these policies, you need to have a minimum number of people and jobs, you need to identify uses, and you need to identify minimum densities. And if there's a zoning bylaw amendment that is passed to implement these policies that would identify uses, densities, and heights, those can't be appealed except by the minister. So staff are generally supportive. These changes will allow for successful planning around station stops, and they do link directly to the new Places to Grow plan. And finally, there are some proposed changes related to secondary planning. Ms. Weiss mentioned this. There will be a moratorium, or they're proposing a moratorium for 2 years on any new secondary plans, unless an appeal is approved by council. Staff are supportive of this as it gives greater strength to municipal decisions on secondary planning. It also includes a description of a secondary plan, which would mean being part of an official plan added by amendment that contains policies and land use designations that apply to multiple contiguous parcels of land. So staff are concerned with that last piece, the multiple contiguous parcels of land. Our interpretation is that it may not or would not apply to one large parcel of land. And the city has in the past prepared secondary plans for areas that are just one large parcel, for example, Chinook Brown lands and the HPH lands. So we think that this may impact the city's ability to develop a secondary plan on single parcel lands, which would benefit from a secondary planning process. And finally, I'm not sure if members of Planning Committee recall, but over the past couple of years, there have been a few other staff reports that we brought forward relating to proposed changes to the Planning Act. There were a number of recommendations that were forwarded to the ministry in the past. What we're recommending and what have been included with the staff report are some of those recommendations that we still feel are relevant and important, and may not have been included in any proposed changes to date. So we've included those as well. And just as an aside for next steps, should Bill 139 receive royal assent, we would have to look at our official plan policies and incorporate any changes into the official plan, and we would also need to review the zoning bylaw for conformity. And then in addition, if there were any changes relating to decision timeframes, we would just have to look at our processes and make sure that we were in compliance with any of those requirements.
So as I had mentioned, the bill has received first reading. It's expected that when the House resumes in the fall, that this will proceed through that process. So next would be second reading, where the principle of the bill would be debated, and it could be sent to a standing committee where they go through the bill more thoroughly, and there will be an opportunity for people to make submissions on the bill itself. Because of the big changes in this bill and how it gives so much more emphasis on the council decision, I think it's important that council, if they support it, to support it at that stage. And one of the directions in the resolutions is to allow legal staff to attend at standing committee potentially with other municipalities to speak to any technical matters that may arise as the bill proceeds, and to demonstrate the support of municipalities for the changes that are in the bill, consistent with the recommendations of this report. If it passes through standing committee, it would go for third reading and then potentially royal assent. I would note that, at least in the papers, it has been indicated that ministry staff are anticipating that this will be enacted in the spring of next year. So I think there is a demonstrated desire by the province to continue with this bill. So subject to any questions, those are my comments.
Thank you, Joanna and Anita. And I have Councillor Collins, Councillor Partridge, and I have myself on the list. Councillor Collins.
Thanks for a very good summary of where we're at with the proposed changes. I would like to ask a question as it relates to the waste facilities that you mentioned, Anita. So to be clear, the changes would affect waste applications in what way? There is always currently a call for the municipality to comment on waste facilities that have or require a certificate of approval, and that has a different name provincially now, and it escapes me, but you know what I'm referring to. And then, of course, there's the formal planning process that waste facilities go through. And my concern is, what I thought I heard is that the new legislation may help facilitate expanded waste facilities, private or public, and that may, in some cases, negate the community's ability to either appeal or participate as fully as they do today compared to what the new legislation proposes. So that's my question and concern kind of wrapped up in one, through you, Madam Chairman.
Through the chair to the councillor, at this time it's difficult to say what impact that would have at that level. What the changes to the bill are proposing are to elevate the status of any policy statements that are issued by the Ministry of Environment under that act in particular. So right now it's sort of a general high-level statement. It is raising the, I guess, the status of elements relating to resource recovery and waste reduction at a high level. But again, until we actually really understand better what those future policy statements might be that are issued by the Ministry of Environment, it's difficult to say what impact that would have. But I think that's a fair comment, and maybe there's something in the comments that we can add to that effect, that we're just, we want to understand what that trickle-down effect would be.
When do we anticipate more information to fully understand what the impact is? Will that come out in future readings, or is that something that is a separate policy statement from the ministry apart from the OMB changes that are proposed?
The act itself, through the chair to the councillor, the act itself that's referred to as being a policy statement is separate from the Planning Act and from the OMB reform. It's my interpretation that would be any policy statements that the Ministry of Environment would issue going forward. So any new items, any policy statements that they issue, then we would have to have regard for those. Well, actually, our decisions would have to be consistent with any of those policy statements. So it's hard to predict what that might be, but I think it's just something that we have to keep in the back of our mind going forward, especially when we're looking at development applications, is what type of impact or what role do those policy statements play in the decisions that you make as a council. And I think that's one of the concerns that we've had and that we've addressed in our comments, is that we don't understand how this is all going to align. Like it is very early stages, so we've spent a little bit of time assessing it, but we don't know the full impacts. But we do have some questions about how does all of this align? How does it align with our decision making, and how does it align with the current policies that we have?
Is there a way then that we can direct staff to go back to not just the ministry that's dealing with the OMB changes, but the Environmental and Climate Change Ministry to talk about how these changes in legislation will overlap each other and what the impact will be for municipalities? And I say that in the context of, oftentimes we feel like when we're dealing with large waste applications, and many of the private companies come to the table with significant resources, a lot more resources certainly than individuals or neighborhood associations. So whether it's the aggregate issue we dealt with in Flamborough years ago, and we still see hints of, we deal with TerraPure right now, gasification plant in the lower city, I mean, the list goes on, Liberty Energy. And oftentimes we find that these decisions are made by and large at the provincial and ministerial level, rather than they're being treated as a local planning decision that will have an impact in some shape or form on the surrounding area or the broader community, depending on whether there's issues with truck traffic or issues with the air monitoring or other issues. So I'm not interested in receiving less control over those types of planning applications that certainly have a provincial and should have a provincial involvement. But it seems like just from the wording that you provided, Anita, that there may be changes on the horizon that don't help us in that regard, and I want to make sure that that's not the case. So if I could, at the appropriate time, Madam Chairman, ask that staff report back more thoroughly on that with some additional information that they may obtain from the one or more ministries. I'd be interested to know how waste facilities might be, the legislation related to waste facility applications through planning or other means would be impacted with the proposed new legislation.
So is that direction, Councillor? Did you want to put that forward as a motion? Absolutely. Okay, so I want to just get that now. So it's moved. Do you have that, Ida? Or we'll have Councillor Collins write it out, whatever. Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Green. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And I really appreciate this update. There's probably as many questions that come out of it, but at this point, my understanding from what you've said, it's first reading. It's very much, I don't know if draft is the proper term, but there's not a lot of details in it right now. But I've also, can you just confirm that it's been sent to a subcommittee for further work?
No, at this time, through the chair, it hasn't been sent. First reading is essentially just preemptive, yeah, so they introduce the bill. At second read, it has to pass second reading. Okay. And then at that point, I believe, then it would be potentially sent to a standing committee.
Okay, thank you. So I'm curious, on one of your slides, you talk about the three components, the OMB reform, the planning changes, and the Conservation Authority changes. If I thought I heard you say that those changes have been hived off, and they're not being dealt with in the OMB reforms. Could you just unpack that a bit for me?
Oh, my apologies. Through you, Madam Chair. I meant to say through the presentation, through the reporting of staff to council, it's been hived off. So that report went to GIC, I believe, on June 21st. Right. So that schedule for the content, because that had a much shorter time frame for providing submissions. So my colleague, Ms. Filippone, I believe, at least brought a report, if not presented, at GIC on the 21st.
And thank you so much for clarifying that, because I was pretty sure I remembered something coming through not too long ago and us being updated on it. My next question is on the OMB reform, talking about the Ontario Municipal Board becomes the local planning appeal tribunal. Does it morph into that? Is it going to be completely different? How much do we know at this point?
Through you, Madam Chair, the Schedule 2 bill, the act there, indicates that the Ontario Municipal Board Act is repealed and replaced by this new legislation, and that the Ontario Municipal Board continues as the local planning appeal tribunal. Beyond that, and the rules set out, there isn't much that has been provided in terms of information about how that transition will occur and whether or not the full complement of today's OMB becomes the LPAT, or how the new rules of that tribunal will be created. There's a lot of unknowns in that process.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And so I guess another question I have is, you know, we've worked together on a couple of OMB appeals that certainly I've got more than my share of them, as do many other councillors around the table. What effect is there going to be on any that are currently in the queue?
One of the changes in the bill is allowing the minister to make regulations, and it's for transition. And so the cutoff or the determination about what matters may currently be in process be converted to the new process, or whether they maintain their rights as it related to the existing process when they initiated either their application or appeal, and then new applications or new appeals follow the new process. That cutoff isn't known. And as I mentioned, I know the City of Toronto councillors did pass a motion trying to request the province make the cutoff the introduction of this bill. So.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the spring, I mean, certainly I would suspect through you, Madam Chair, that any that are decided on as of before this bill, that's it, unless they're appealed. I don't know if they would actually be captured, but it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. And my last question, Madam Chair, and I'm just wondering about ministerial zoning orders and how they would be handled, if at all, through the OMB process, or is that strictly through the minister?
I believe that would be, I'd have to follow up with you on that one to give you specific information, because I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because, you know, certainly we've got a number of sites in Flamborough that have ministerial zoning orders on them. One of them being the proposed quarry for the 11th concession that was earlier referenced. You know, we have certainly Flamborough Downs has an MZO on it, and we have others as well. So I would be interested to know just if it has the OMB process, or if it's handled strictly separately and will continue to be through the minister's office. Those are my questions. Thank you, and good presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. I did have myself next on the speakers list, and I want to thank both Anita and Joanna for bringing this forward, and I asked that it be moved up to a presentation because of the importance of this. I sit on the planning task force as the council representative in Hamilton, and I know we had a conference call on Thursday, so that's what kind of drove this forward, because we did agenda review Monday, and I thought, well, no, there's a lot more questions than answers right now. I think on the conference call, I mean, many communities involved in this they all have different setups than we do. So it was quite interesting to be part of the conversation of what other communities do or how they deal with things. But one of the issues that came forward, and I noticed on our submission, page 204, and I raised that on Monday, was we're saying here that we're supporting the requirement to send matters back to municipality for a second decision. So the scenario would be if we made a decision as planning committee, approved by council, it gets appealed, goes to the board, and the board can say, well, no, send it back for review. Could you just clarify this? Because in our conversations at the task force, we had major issues with this.
One of the criticisms of the current OMB process is that with the de novo hearings, and if the board is satisfied with the appellant's appeal, that the board is substituting a decision that may be an amended version of the proposal, or just substitutes a decision for council that council didn't have an opportunity to make. I think what is being proposed here is to reflect that criticism and allow an opportunity when the board finds that there is a problem with either consistency or conformity with a provincial plan or policy, to let in light of that decision of the tribunal, let council be vested again with the decision-making power to either potentially reaffirm a decision or make a nuanced decision that if it's inconsistent because of this, we then think this and take this position. And it obviously then, if there is a subsequent appeal, is the perfect opportunity for the council to give legal instruction on that basis. So to that end, I think it's responding to that criticism.
Okay, thank you. And I just also want to ask clarification, because by that process, there's different sort of roads now that can be taken. So it comes back to council, because it doesn't come back to committee. It comes back to council, correct? So I know there's a whole bunch of ifs on what's happening. So we say it does come back to council, it comes back to committee, and we have the option of saying, no, we're not changing the decision, or we have the option of saying we're reviewing it. But if we do review it, is there not a timeline now that we have to do another public process? Because that was a concern.
In terms of the bill, or the second decision coming back to council, yes, it's a council decision. I would anticipate in conjunction with the planning department that we would bring it as a report through planning committee. So it would come in the city of Hamilton back through this committee for a second decision. But there's no requirement in the bill that the public process that is originally followed for the first decision be followed again. It's a reconsideration by this committee and council.
Okay, I'm going to clarify offline, because that's not what I think was discussed at our task force meeting, because there was a mention of a further 90-day process in which we would, if we decided we're going to go through it all again, there's be the advertising of the public meeting, would be a 90-day window. So, and that's why there's major concerns of having to go through this, not just timing, but cost. And we can deal with it offline, but I appreciate the comments here, and certainly the discussions, and whatever staff continue to work with the representatives as they're working on this. So I'll leave it at that. And Councillor Green.
Thank you. I would have wanted to comment on Councillor Collins's motion that I seconded as it relates to waste facilities, and thank him for expanding on that need to be very clear about the local community's role in that planning. As you know, Madam Chair, my ward, particularly in Ward 3, probably has the greatest amount of recycling, scrapper, waste facility businesses directly abutting neighborhoods. And I want to, for a moment, through you to staff and everybody present who knows, but for on the public record today, identify one such scenario so you get a sense for what that's like, where some years ago, this committee approved a waste transfer facility that has now been bought by a company called Easy Waste, that is in the Lucy Day neighborhood, which is Sherman north of Barton, that had as a Ministry of Environment condition that a buffer be placed between its operations and the neighborhood. So for 10 or 15 years, it had a green buffer, a lot that was used, that had trees and created a buffer between the operations and the housing. When this new company bought it, they came in, leveled everything. It's now a dust pit, and these community members have to deal with ongoing operations literally in their backyard. Dust, noise, belligerence sometimes from staff of this particular operation, and I am at a loss for how to deal with this situation. We're told that it was a condition with the Ministry of Environment. They're looking at us as the local municipality. They're looking at me as the individual councillor and saying, like, what are you going to do about this? Our quality of living has been completely diminished in a way that, folks are looking to even try to move out, but are afraid now they can't sell their homes because of this operation. So how does something like that fall between the cracks? And if we're putting comments forward, I want that named in a very specific way as an example about how these disruptions affect our community, how we have little, as I'm told, jurisdiction over them to shut down operations, to enforce the conditions that we place to the Ministry of Environment. But if we were to see that, if I were to show you guys what this neighborhood is dealing with, it's one of maybe 2 or 3 files in my time as a councillor that I truly regret not having more power to be able to just shut it down, because it's absolutely horrific. So in Councillor Collins's motion, when staff go back for that recommendation, I want those examples, particularly that are abutting residential communities, literally up against their backyards, to be given prominence to the submissions to the province, so that they get a sense for the disruption that it causes, not just like environmental particulate matter, but literally neighborhoods and people's enjoyment of their, I think, a rational, reasonable enjoyment of their backyards. So I wanted to name that specifically with this opportunity, because it's something I've been working on with staff for quite some time, that if we can put into the provincial submission, would make it a very clear and practical example of where this has gone awry. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Seeing no further questioners, may I have a motion to receive the staff presentation? Moved by Councillor Connolly, second by Councillor Partridge. All in favour? The report here, and that's being forwarded. I'm also sending the agenda item today on to the AMO task force so that they will be able to, because they'll be having their big AMO meeting in August, and they'll be taking as AMO their comments forward as well. So I'll certainly be happy to supply that. With regards to the report, then, may I have a motion to approve it? Moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Green. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Item 8.1 is the Staging of Development Report 2017 Update, PED 17-128 citywide. Any questions on this? And I'm just getting to it. Alvin and Guy, both here. Thank you. Any questions on this report? Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering if, perhaps through you, Madam Chair, to Alvin, if you could just do maybe just a brief overview of the report for those in attendance or anyone viewing this meeting, just to give them a sense of what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Alvin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee, and unfortunately no public. So I'm just presenting the Staging of Development 2017 Information Update. Typically the report does cover a 3-year period. In this particular scenario, due to timelines, we did an update for 2017 only. There is a report underway currently for 2018 to 2020 in terms of the staging. So the Staging of Development report is actually a policy of our Urban Hamilton official plan. It's located in policy section F.3.6.3I of Volume 1, whereby the Staging of Development plan shall be established with consideration of criteria for determining the appropriate staging and priority for development. The criteria in particular include status of plans of subdivision, provincial legislation regarding land supply, density targets, and intensification, which, as I'm sure you're aware, are subject to change currently under the changes to places to grow. Status of adjacent lands, financing, serviceability, and market forces. With respect to market forces, we do send a letter of inquiry to the various developers and consultants that have development applications, in particular plans of subdivision and condominium, as to their intentions for bringing them forward to full construction. So the Staging of Development report will integrate the city's financial planning of growth-related capital costs with the land use planning process and the timing of orderly development with adequate servicing programs. The purpose of the Staging of Development report in particular will inform the 10-year capital budget process by estimating potential development charge revenues and development charge expenditures related to new growth areas. This information, in conjunction with the city's vacant land inventory report, will monitor and determine the existing supply of service lands to meet housing demands and to track the 3-year supply of service residential and employment lands. Ultimately, the report will identify the required infrastructure investment strategies and cost-sharing policies needed to be included in the development charges background study and bylaw for July of 2019, as well as the future coordinated multi-year capital budget submissions. In review, the Staging of Development plan currently identifies 14 plans of subdivisions as submitted by the applicant for potential draft approval this year. 21 existing draft approved plans of subdivision are expected to proceed with servicing this year as well. With respect to the 14 submitted draft plan of subdivisions identified for potential approval this year, it's anticipated creation of a maximum of 3,064 dwelling units, primarily comprised of 345 singles, 18 semi-detached units, 1,103 townhouse units, 1,530 apartment units. In addition, we applied a 30% development potential to industrial, commercial, institutional parcels, and based on the current 14 submitted draft plans, it's anticipated 1,763,918 square feet of industrial, commercial, institutional to come online. We've also looked at the activity from the last Staging of Development report, which covers 2014 to 2016. Over those last 3 years, draft plan approvals have added approximately 8,616 potential dwelling units. In particular, again, it's 3,123 singles, which is about 36.2% of that stock. 426 semi-detached dwellings, about 4.9%. 3,646 townhouse units, 42.3%. 1,421 apartment units, 16.5%, and again, about 1.8 million of industrial, commercial, industrial. So what you can see from this slide is the predominance of the singles and townhouse developments over these last 3 years, as they own a rather significant percentage share of built form. In addition, we reviewed the registered plans of subdivision and condominiums by unit type. Over the last 3 years, 5,612 potential dwelling units were created through the registration of 38 plans of subdivision and 49 plans of condominium. Of note, 20 common element plans and 4 condominium conversions were submitted and did not actually physically create new units. Common elements draft plans of condominium would just be establishing tenure for roadways, landscape areas, visitors parking, and with respect to condo conversions, again, it's not an actual new unit being created. With respect to that, 5,612 units that were created were comprised of 1,927 singles, 160 semi-detached dwelling units, 2,049 townhouse units, and 1,476 apartment units over that time period. That's a total of 5,612 units through those registrations. We also broke it down by community in looking at those registrations. In Stoney Creek, it was about 35.6% of the registrations occurred. Glanbrook was 21.2%, Hamilton 18.2%, Flamborough was 15.4%, Ancaster 8.6%, and Dundas 1%. Of note, the difference in numbers between the draft approvals and registration is due to a number of factors, such as, but not limited to, phase registrations by the developers. There's lag time between the draft approval and registration process, as well as they clear conditions of approval for those developments. We also looked at building permit activity over those 3 years. The city is averaging about 2,241 units over those last 3 years. In particular, the breakdown by annum is provided there, as you can see. An additional average of 134 units were created through residential conversions from non-residential and/or additions and alterations based on building permit data to the best of our abilities. Again, the per annum breakdown is provided there as well. And similar to my previous comments, the difference between the draft approval and registration numbers and building permit activity differs due to lag time, again, with respect to clearing conditions and the building permit process, as well as the developments which require additional planning approvals, such as site plan control or part lot control to subdivide the lots further. Those same data were converted into various tables that are here before you. So for 2014 to 2016, building permit activity by dwelling type, you'll see predominantly, again, is 40% single detached, 33% townhouses, 23% of apartments, with a small percentage, 4% being semi-detached units over this 3-year period. Similarly, the chart to the right is the building permit activity by volume as well as dwelling type. So the breakdown is provided there. The numbers are to the right of each of the columns and color-coded for your reference. That in essence summarizes what we've concluded for 2017. As I mentioned, we are working on the 2018 to 2020 report currently with submissions from the developers to be received this month.
Thank you very much. I have a speakers list. I have Councillor Collins, Councillor Partridge, and then Councillor Conley.
Thanks, Madam Chairman, and a very good informative report, Alvin. A lot of information to digest there, a lot of numbers. It is a very important report, of course, because as we know that the largest part of our assessment driving numbers are related to the residential growth, even though we'd certainly like to see more in commercial industrial. I do have a couple of questions related to the numbers from 2014 seem to be trending down through 15 and 16 as you look at some of the unit numbers there. And I think that the 3 bars that you had on the last slide there kind of tell a story. Is that in part related to maybe were there DC changes back in 14 that may have driven some accelerated applications, or would that be considered a normal year through you, Madam Chairman, to Alvin?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, our exercise didn't really look at that particular aspect of the data. It's something we can definitely look at to report back on.
Okay, I'm just curious to know, I mean, we've seen a lot of interesting things happen in the local real estate market since 2014, and so it kind of surprises me that that year would almost be considered a banner year compared to 15 and 16. Have we received anything anecdotally, or does staff have anything to offer as it relates to that migration and wave of development that's coming from Toronto, and the fact that some of the GTA municipalities are kind of built out, so to speak, as it relates to, you know, they're building up now instead of out to their urban boundary. We still have the flexibility to do both, and I'm just wondering whether in future years we'll start to see some more significant unit yield as it relates to the fact that, A, the Toronto prices are still, you know, relatively very high compared to our own, and two, the fact that they have less ability to provide units in different built forms to those people who are looking for new accommodation. Sorry for the long question. But.
So through the chair, maybe I can help a little bit with that answer. The short answer is yes, I think we will start to see a bit of that trend. It's also important to keep in mind that this report is reporting on units that are approved through plan of subdivision. So we're not capturing units approved through site plan, where we have been seeing some of the intensification numbers. We're generally on an improving trend. Last year we had a few less than the year previous, but that's representing typically in the neighborhood of 35 to 40% of the supply going to building permit. Okay. So that's another part of the story that this report doesn't get to, because this focuses on plan of subdivision. I think if you look, the municipalities, the regional planning commissioners have been looking at this issue of housing supply quite closely, and in terms of what sort of how many years supply is available within the region. Overall, if memory serves, I think the number that was identified in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area was somewhere in the neighborhood of 70,000 units that are currently sitting across the region. It's outside of the City of Toronto, not including the City of Toronto, either draft plan or register approved. Typically the other municipalities tend to be in sort of just under 4 years supply. Hamilton's in a bit of a better situation. We're closer to around a 7-year supply or thereabouts. Some of our neighbor municipalities, if you look at what their subdivision supplies are, they are dropping in below 4 years, which would suggest that that some of that demand is going to start to shift more towards the Hamilton market.
Okay, is there a way through you, Madam Chairman, for next year's report to include some of that regional context? I think it's important, just because we are in competition with others for that investment and for the business, and certainly for the new residential growth. And I think it's important for us to know how we're faring in regards to others, and so you've provided great information today. If there's an opportunity for us to include that next year, that would be beneficial. The other question I have is relates to servicing, and so servicing plays a big role in terms of how many units we see come online as part of the report. And I know we've had some challenges, and staff will report back soon on some issues on Stoney Creek Mountain and other areas. How is that playing a role then on a go-forward basis? Not to get into the whole issue of how we're going to deal with that, but is the servicing issue affecting those numbers for better or for worse on a go-forward basis? Through you, Madam Chairman.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So for the purpose of this report, in terms of the ones we identify for registration, that's when we do look at the servicing. We account for, in essence, what is already accounted for in the capital projects, and to ensure that these can come on stream. So as part of the exercise, we do look at the potential servicing and ensure that there are no concerns to be able to bring it online for 2017. The next report, similarly, will go through 2018 to 2020 with that same mentality, looking at when services will be available, and therefore aligning the current approved draft plan approvals with an annum, whether it be 2018, 19, or 20, with respect to when those services would be available. I think, guys.
And if we have challenges on the horizon, we would be made aware of it in that kind of a futures report then, Alvin, through you, Madam Chairman, or whoever wants to answer. Guy?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just add to what Alvin indicated, cost sharing is part of virtually every development. And in order for us to share costs, we have to commit funds from our standpoint. And as Councillor Collins has indicated, it's become more and more challenging, and it will become more and more challenging. We're already being told that in the next 3 years, our funding will, on the capital side, will be more and more restricted, and that will ultimately, if not delay, at least postpone some of the projects that could come on stream earlier based on the market. Right now, we're having challenges not only with the funding of projects, but also in terms of actually building and keeping up with the pace of development that's occurring. As Councillor Collins also indicated, he's aware of what's happening with the Upper Centennial Trunk, and the delays there is actually starting to slow down the ability of developers to actually sell their product, because they're not able to deliver in time based on the infrastructure needs that they have. In that situation, we are looking at alternatives, but there's not always a solution. In that case, we do have solutions for them in the short term that will bridge that gap, but it is going to become more restrictive and more of a challenge going forward, and we have to be very cognizant of that.
Thanks
and
for that.
It could impact the pace of development, as you indicated.
Thanks for that, Guy, and I raise it in the context of, it's a revenue generator for us as it relates to new assessment, and so if we don't invest in the servicing and we don't see the new assessment, then that is certainly reflected through the budget process when Mr. Zagaric and his staff present our growth targets for future years. And, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, the growth that we've seen for the last number of years has come from growth communities such as Flamborough, Upper Stoney Creek, Binbrook, and other areas. So my concern from what I've heard from Guy and what I'm starting to see a little bit here, and I've had some informal conversations with staff, is that those growth estimates and numbers that we've seen historically, and we started to see a dip last year when we were well below the 1% that we usually see, the issues related to servicing and possible delay of new units coming online will have a revenue impact on the city's budget. So is that something that, I'm not looking to create a lot of work for someone, but I would like to know if there are warning flags and some indicators that we should be aware of prior to the start of the budget process. Is that something that Guy and Alvin and others can report back on as it relates to, if you don't make investments in certain areas of the city, we won't see these units come online. If these units don't come online, you don't see these new revenues as it relates to assessment growth. So there's a domino effect here, and I'm sure it's multi-departmental because it involves not just growth management, but planning, public works, finance, of course. And so without, again, creating a lot of work for someone through you, Madam Chairman, is there a way that someone could, or a group could report back to us, even verbally, to maybe highlight some of the issues that Guy just provided a glimpse of that are maybe on the horizon and soon to peak with the development community and certainly the growth communities related by or represented by our suburban councillors?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's a number, there isn't any one source of information or one report that we can bring forward, but we are bringing forward a series of reports, one in the fall regarding our Shovel Ready Initiatives program, and one of the clear indicators is that we have to make choices about which priorities we put forward. And what I mean by choices is that there's the affordability line starts to rise higher and higher on the list, and which means you can do less and less in terms of infrastructure projects. So that is one report. There is also, as part of our capital, 10-year capital reporting in the fall, Director Sergi and I have talked about including a section regarding where we're at in terms of the demand coming in through this program, in terms of what developers are asking for and actually what we can afford in terms of our cost sharing number. So that will be indicated in that report as well. So there's a couple of sources there of information. There isn't any one that we're actually putting together, but we're very cognizant of the challenge that you're speaking of.
Okay. If one or both of those reports could then focus in part on assessment growth and the impact and challenges that will be highlighted in those reports will have on assessment. I think it's important for us to know that on a go-forward basis, just from a pure budgeting perspective. So appreciate the information from both Alvin and Guy, and I look forward to those future reports.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Partridge?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Alvin, appreciate that, and Guy as well. I appreciate that, the questions being asked previously, because I guess my question is, and this came up in the multi-year budgeting, but my question is, knowing that we had the massive growth coming in Waterdown, and it's been on the books for more than 10 years. In fact, I think it was all approved in 2002, and then, 2005, some of the construction and approvals started. So here we are in 2017, and how does it happen that we know all this growth is coming, we're approving these plans, and yet the infrastructure, for the roads especially, is just not happening. And now we've got chaos in a community that should not be dealing with this. And I'd really like to know, how did this not get planned over the past 12 years, knowing that this growth was coming? And I'm not sure, Jason, if you want to address that, or Guy.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Partridge, I mean, that's a question that is very complex in terms of the types of impacts that we have in terms of our decision-making regarding infrastructure. Primarily, it is not a planning problem because the projects are planned for properly. It's an affordability and a revenue issue. And what is happening is if you have development charges as your main source of development funding, and every time our development charges are either exempted or reduced in some way, it has an impact overall on the revenue that we have at our disposal for projects. We have a general development charge. It's put in a general pot, and priorities are set by in this chamber by council in terms of the growth projects that will be funded on an annual basis. And there's a finite amount of money that's collected, and that impacts the affordability of how many projects we're able to do physically. And over the years, those revenues have not diminished, but have gotten to a point where there's more needs, obviously, than there is resources in terms of the revenue that's being generated. So we've got to look very carefully at not only the quantum of the DC in the next round of development charges, but also the kinds of exemptions we give to everybody, to the downtowns, to other areas, whether we give area exemptions or not. These are all things that will be brought forward to committee and council over the next year, because our bylaw is up for renewal in July of 2019. So again, we got to be very cognizant. And on the one hand, when we give exemptions, it's actually reducing the revenue stream that we have. So, the old adage about cutting your nose off to spite your face, it comes back to bite you years later when you're looking at a deficit in a roads project like in your community, and we're looking for ways to fund it, and it's hard, and we have to look at alternatives. We're now looking at ways to do just that in your community, where we're looking at development, doing more than just cost sharing, but actually front-ending agreements with us. And that was done in Binbrook in the past, and I was part of that in the 90s. And we may be looking at that again because of affordability. So
no, and I appreciate that, Guy. And certainly we've had those conversations over the past, I would say probably the past year now, of the developers actually taking on some of those projects and front-ending them, building them, and then looking at that cost sharing. And I see that as a way of leveraging, if you will, just, if we can't do the work, then we need to have the developers do the work. But I really see it as very poor planning, and it is something we have to address. And I know we've had this conversation before, but, you know, if we're, I don't know of any exemptions that have been given out into the developments in the Waterdown in Flamborough area. Those DCs have not been exempted to my knowledge. Excuse me, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, it really comes down to very poor community planning when you know all this development is coming. You have over 7,000 homes that are going to be built in a short period of time, and you don't have the infrastructure for roads within a community. And it's not just Waterdown, it's happening in Binbrook and Stoney Creek and all other areas as well. And geographically, we don't have the area to build it. So it is very poor planning on the part of the city to not address that for future years, knowing that that's what's going to be the challenge. My question, though, is when I look at the report, and thank you, Alvin, this one will be for you. When I go through the report, and I do see that the 2017 priority processing for draft plan application, I do see Flamborough Power Centre listed, but there's a fair bit of development going on right now, and I don't see any other Waterdown developments listed. Am I missing that, or is it just not on here?
So through the chair to Councillor Partridge, these were identified by the developers as to what they wish to bring on market, and then they were vetted through our working group, which included Public Works, everybody else, with respect to the service component,
right,
to determine that prioritization list. Some of the developments on there as well were phase registrations, so parts of it could have been built already, but it's still included in the 27 prioritization list because there's additional phases to come on stream. So that's the likelihood for that particular instance.
It just seems odd that there isn't any in here for Waterdown when I know that there's been some approvals for 2017. Okay. I don't really have any other questions. I certainly do agree with Councillor Collins' issues that he raised, and I look forward to that 10-year capital report, on capital projects report, which is coming through in this fall, 2017. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Connolly.
Thank you. Good questions on the last two councillors. Probably 80% of what I was going to ask has been asked, but I'm still going to ask some questions. I don't see and these are general sort of things, I don't see us ever getting ahead of the game. I think we're behind the 8 ball, and I don't see us getting in front of the 8 ball. I know one of the suggestions was development charges that we've given exemptions to, and I have to agree with Councillor Partridge. I don't think there's too many been given in Stoney Creek or in Waterdown or in the other high development areas. And we just seem to, and I've said this probably in the last 3 years I've been on council, that we get all the houses in, we get all the development, then we say, oh, we need some streets here. We need people to get around. And they're never looked at until the last minute. They're like, oh, we need that bypass in Upper Stoney Creek. Let's get one going, you know? But we've got traffic jams all over the place. I don't think and I know a pet peeve of mine is the Red Hill Valley and the link. But when we do surveys up in the mountain in Binbrook, it affects the Red Hill Valley. It affects the link tremendously. And I think people, oh, we can wait till 2031 to extend the Red Hill Valley, for instance. Can we, and I'm not pushing the Red Hill Valley today, but I'm just saying, can we? Does anybody look at that and say, if we build all these houses in Upper Stoney Creek and Binbrook in the next 5 years, can we support those houses with the cars that is going to be developed because of them? And it just appears to me it's an afterthought. It's never thought out ahead. And I understand, I guess it's development charges that push this whole thing, but if we can't afford to do a survey or 500 more houses in Empire Estates, don't build them, because we can't afford them. We can't afford the infrastructure. We can't afford anything that goes along with it. But we have to build them because we want the $1 billion a year that we get from the assessment. So it's a catch-22 that I can never see us catching up on. Is there a plan, or how do you suggest, don't even know who to ask, how do you suggest we catch up on this without slowing things down and letting things catch up? And that might not even be logical, but I'm asking the question because I'm frustrated. I see it every day. I see more cars, you know, where it used to take 5 minutes or 7 minutes to get from the QEW to top of the hill. Now it's 15 to 20. And that's good. It was more than that last night. It was about 22 minutes it took us to get up there. So do people look at the long term, not just the streets, but not just the local streets, but how are we going to get traffic in and out? Is that, I know I rambled a bit, but if somebody could take all that rambling, put it down into a...
Jason, do you want to speak to that?
So through the chair, yes, we do look at that. That's the basis for the master plans that are done for transportation, also for water and sewer. And that's done at the time of, in terms of the forecasted growth that drives that master planning work, that's done at the time of the, in our case, the first grids process that led to the first official plan update. That generates the numbers that drive that master planning, and what you're seeing right now is really the fulfillment of that forecasted growth that was the basis for that original growth planning. That's going through review now for the update to the post-2031 period, so that same process would be undertaken to say what amount of growth are we forecasting, how does that drive the transportation needs as well as other infrastructure needs, and then what this reporting does is it presents to council where we're at in terms of what is our annual yield and how that then aligns to the implementation of the growth forecast that were done. So the short answer to the council's question is yes, that is part of the master planning work that is done through Public Works on the transportation, water, wastewater, other services as well. Those growth forecasts are what underlie that modeling.
But the master plan was done a few years ago. Have we changed it enough to keep up with the growth? Because we've had exceptional growth in the last 3 to 5 years, I would think, more than probably we expected when we did the master plan. So, if we have more, are we jigging the master plan to reflect more, which would reflect more streets and more roads and more everything, or we say we got a 10-year master plan and that's what we're going to stay with when maybe it's not realistic what we proposed a few years ago to what the reality is today. To someone, please, through the chair.
Yeah, so through the chair, the master plans do get updated on a regular basis. So as I said, they're going through an update right now. I can tell you that in terms of the unit production we're seeing, our existing master plans were generally based on somewhere, I can't remember the precise number, but somewhere in the range of 2,500 units per year. So we are not significantly off in terms of the actual number of units that are being built versus what was anticipated through the original grids work and the master plans. But yes, those master plans do get updated. Those growth forecasts do get updated, and that's the process that we're undergoing right now.
So I hear in one sense we don't have enough development charges to do all the infrastructure that we need, but in another sense, oh yeah, we're right on target. So I don't understand how we can be on target and not have any money to do the target. Through the chair.
So through the chair, I can try to respond. In terms of the reference to DCs, I mean, there are limitations in terms of what proportion of a capital cost the DCs can fund, even if they're maximized to the maximum that we're able to charge. I think to Guy's point, he was speaking to some of the, for example, citywide, there is there was a reduction for non-residential. I believe, if I recall the numbers correctly, there was something like $17 per square foot was what the actual cost was on the non-res, and the citywide rate is somewhere in the $11 range. So that's the kind of gap that Guy was talking about that does require an offsetting levy subsidy whenever the less than the full DC rate is applied. So that's one of the funding issues that Guy was speaking to in terms of the reference back to DCs.
So is anybody looking, my last question, thank you. Is anybody looking at how we can get out of this snowball effect that we've got, that we're just, we can't keep up with infrastructure, et cetera, but we're still going to build all the houses, which is going to just make a mess of the city as far as travel. Is there a plan in place, or is there somebody looking at a plan to fix this, even if it takes 3 years, or I don't know how many years? But is there a plan that we can say, good, we do that, we should be out of 90% of our problems?
Yeah, so through the chair, two parts to that question. One is the piece that Guy spoke about in terms of looking at what are those critical infrastructure pieces that are tied to leveraging growth and being able to sort of separate those out for council's consideration as being tied to the continuing to deliver on the housing growth that we forecast. Second piece to that is that one of the elements that corporate services is actually working on through Mike Zagaric, tied into the updates to the master plans, the update to the grid's growth forecasts, is a fiscal sustainability strategy to look at what are the DC projections and what are the strategies for funding any shortfall in those DC projections. So that is intended to come forward as part of that 2019 DC bylaw update.
So we got to wait 2 more years to get that? Is that what you're saying? We're just going to struggle through everything for the next 2 years? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. So through the chair, there's not any intention to bring forward significant changes to the DC rates until the time of that DC bylaw update.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Yep, thank you. Alvin, back to you. On page 3 of 10, you have a list of priority processing for draft plan application approval. Mountain Gate is on there.
Yes.
Now, if you refer to 5.1, it's actually 9255 Airport Road. It's been in the hopper for 935 days, and there's a reason for that. It's a dog's breakfast. So now I see on this list that it's going to be a priority to get it through, even though it's still a dog's breakfast. Why is it put on the priority list?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, in consultation with the planning staff, particularly Mr. Clackett is overseeing the file, as well as looking at what servicing is out there and available. That is the last piece in Mount Hope that can be serviced currently. I realize there are issues with respect to the built form and the planning design of the subdivision.
403 and the drainage, yeah.
Yeah, but it's been advised to us that those issues have been resolved, and engineering conditions are coming forward, and it's anticipated to bring it forward in discussion with Mr. Clackett, hopefully to an October planning committee meeting. So that's why it was included in the 2017 list.
Okay, that's news to me. All right, so just to clarify, and probably, Alvin, you probably can go sit down now. Just to clarify that the Bimbrook Village actually was created by the former Glenbrook Council. And it was created because the developers came forward and said that they were going to pay for the pipe to go up. So every house sold in Bimbrook is added a surcharge, and it's called the Bimbrook tax, to put toward the value of that pipe that's still not paid off. So just want to put it that way. But the good thing about Bimbrook was that policies were put in place so that it was done in an orderly fashion. So they couldn't leapfrog all over the place. They had to do it in blocks. Having said that, we have 2-lane highway going into the village, which means that traffic now sprays into other roads, which means now my budgets are now exercised to the max because we're trying to repair these roads that were not used 20 years ago as they are today. And the good thing, though, about the Scooby lands was that it was also put in as block strategy, so that from Fruitland to Jones, and Jones to Glover, and Glover to McNeely, and so on and so forth, they were considered blocks 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the landowners have to work together. So the roads have to be put in place first, the sewers have to, everything is all done accordingly. I really suggest that if we ever do that, it's got to be done that way, because both Bimbrook and Scooby have, in my opinion, Bimbrook's benefited from it, and Scooby will benefit from it, because it's got everything all in its place. But then if you go to the Winona Costco, there's nothing in place for sidewalks. We've got 4 or 5 communities that could literally walk to it, and we have no sidewalks to get there. But we can't find any in the DCs because apparently we're tapped out of DCs. And yet Winona and Ward 11, I think, has probably put a lot of money into the DC pot, but there doesn't seem to be enough money to do what we need to have done. So, and that's why we approved the motion last week, or last planning committee, for a feasibility study to find out if we can get these sidewalks in and where will the funding come from, because I was point blankly told that the DCs are tapped. And not just in my area, they're just tapped. So now my question is, there's going to be a motion coming forward at AFNA, and it's a single lot. About 5 years ago, they came in for a building permit, and their DCs were deferred. It didn't mean they weren't paying it, they were deferring them. So now the new one is coming in because we have a new owner of the lot and wants to be deferred for 3 years because he's not ready to build, but he'll build within the 3 years. Part of that motion was we had to find the money to defer the DCs. It's like we put it in the books, but we don't have the money yet. So I don't understand how that works, and I'll probably tweeze that out a little bit more at AFNA. I just probably want to put you on notice that that's what I'll be asking, because it doesn't make sense that we're accounting for something in our books and we don't have the check yet, but we have to find the money now to replace or to actually put the money in. So it's bizarre. So I'd really like to tweeze out the DCs as well, because it's the ones that are putting all the money into the DCs don't seem to benefit a lot from it, or as much as maybe as they could. But anyways, thanks, Alvin. Thanks, Alvin, for your presentation. I noticed that Winona and Binbrook and Mount Hope are heavy in your presentation. I know we're always on your mind, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And with that, for those viewing in the ante room, we do not have quorum, and we're at the end of, sorry, 6 is quorum, Councillor. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Skelly, go ahead.
And well, just while we're getting quorum, I just wanted to raise something, and it's about Rymel Road. And Councillor Conley has, if you look at Rymel Road, I think it's a missed opportunity, and I've checked with Dan on the books. There's nothing on the books for Rymel for the next, I don't know, 20 years. And yet it's sitting there, and it's wide, and it has a piecemeal development from Councillor Conley's ward through to Councillor Ferguson's ward, and through Councillor Whitehead. So it's got a huge opportunity and potential to, I think, help with some of the congestion that is consistent on the Red Hill and the Lynx. So I'm raising it and hoping, and I will raise it again, that we can start looking at better planning, urbanization, and a consistent number of lanes for Rymel so that we can use it as, and maybe Jason, you can speak to that, because it really does go from a road that is 4 to 5 lanes down to 3, back up to 4, and it's all over the place, and it could be an opportunity to help alleviate some of the congestion on the link.
Yeah, so through the chair, I can't speak to the dates. I do know that the urbanization of Rymel has been happening in phases, as the councillor notes. We could get back to you offline in terms of what the dates on that phasing are. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Unfortunately, Mr. Sergi is not here today.
Thank you. I'm looking more, and perhaps I'll have to explore this further, but I think we're going to need to have a plan, a more definitive plan on what we want Rymel to be, because it is a wide road with huge potential, and it's piecemeal right now, and it could be an option, that could help with the congestion and with the amount of growth that we're seeing in wards 11 and well, actually right from Stoney Creek right through to Ancaster.
Okay. With that, seeing no further speakers, may I have a motion to receive Alvin's presentation? Moved by Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Collins. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. And do we need to receive the report, Ida? Hang on. No, it's just an information. Do you want a motion to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Skelly. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to motions now. 9.1 is the historical designation of the Vimy Oak tree located at 79 Hamilton Street, North, Flamborough, Waterdown Legion, Branch 551. Councillor Partridge, do you want to present your motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I will move by myself, and if I could get a seconder. Councillor Farr, thank you. I've been so waiting for you to offer up to be second on one of my motions. And I would like to read it out because, you know, this is really quite an interesting story. Whereas so it's the historical designation of the Vimy Oak tree located at 79 Hamilton Street North, Flamborough, Waterdown Legion, Branch 551. Whereas the Vimy Oak tree is a direct descendant of English oak trees located at Vimy Ridge during, that should say, World War I. Whereas the Vimy Oak tree was planted in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge, April 9th to the 12th, 1917, and whereas the Vimy Oak tree stands as a living memorial to the Canadian soldiers who served in the First World War and serves as a symbolic connection to the most widely known military engagement in Canadian history, therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to add the Vimy Oak tree located at 79 Hamilton Street North, Flamborough, Waterdown Legion 551 to staff's designation work plan for the completion in 2017 in connection with the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge. And there's a couple of attachments to it. One of them is the actual certificate of authenticity, and I find this remarkable. The story that goes with this, when they actually at Vimy Ridge, the soldiers collected the acorns and brought them back home, and they have actually used those to grow oak trees and to propagate additional oak trees, and they are planting them around the world. And we were able to get one in Waterdown at the Waterdown Legion, and it is planted on the corner in a beautiful location where everyone can see it. And the plan is, it's not just a little sapling either. This is, you know, it's about 5 feet tall. And we had quite a good planting ceremony that went along with it. And with this designation, there's also a plan in place to put black wrought iron fencing around it to actually create a bit of a public space there. So I really hope everyone will consider supporting it. It's just such a wonderful piece of our heritage and a good news story. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just wanted to comment. Hopefully they left enough space around it because these trees go very, very big and are very strong. Thank you. With that, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Notices of motion. Councillor Collins, you, I understand, have a couple of notices of motions.
I do, and I'd like to bump them up to motions, and they're actually requests for reports back, so I'm not asking for any changes today. So I would need to move the rules, waive the rules, sorry, to introduce the motion. It's seconded by Councillor Conley. Councillor Skelly, sorry.
Yes. All in favor?
Carried.
Carried.
And in 2007, Madam Chairman, I was here before the Planning Committee and Council asking for legislative changes related to the enforcement of driving schools locally. And so my ward is the home of the local driving school, as you know. And I've had a couple of neighborhoods throughout my ward that have been, over the years, inundated with people who are practicing around the facility.
Got behind a few of them about a week ago.
All right, well, don't admit to anything yet because we may have some legislation coming in. So at the time, we went out to the driving school instructors and driving schools and asked for their input, and licensing staff at the time did a scan in southern Ontario to determine who had legislation. There were very few at the time. I don't think there were maybe any. And we decided at that time to work with the industry and send out a letter stating that we would like your assistance to help these residents who have been inundated with people practicing in their neighborhoods. And so that message worked for a very short period of time, and we're back to where we were before we sent out the message to those schools. And so since that time, a number of municipalities have adopted legislation, certainly Burlington, the most recent. I know Oakville, Guelph, Toronto, others have adopted regulations where they either license the school, the instructor, or the owner of the school, or all three. And in some cases, I believe in Burlington's case, they're now looking at regulating where in the city that the schools can practice and provide their services. So I'm seeking an update to the information report that was provided in 2007. I would move that staff report back to committee with legislative options and alternatives related to the regulation of driving schools in Hamilton that seeks to address the practice areas utilized by driving schools and individual driving instructors, and that the information contained in the report include but not be limited to legislation adopted by neighboring municipalities who've adopted driving school rules and regulations. So I'm asking for a report to come back. I'd like to know what my options and alternatives are, knowing that the landscape has changed over the last decade, and I'm seeking some relief for the residents who have put up with an inordinate amount of traffic on some streets in the vicinity of the driving school.
So it's been moved and seconded. I just want to ask a question. That's just vehicular, just cars, not the transport trucks?
I would leave it open to whatever staff feels appropriate contained in the report, if you believe that the trucks need to be a part of that. I haven't received those complaints because they are limited to truck routes in terms of where they can drive, but if you want that included,
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that.
I wouldn't mind that being included if there's an opportunity there, because I do have that problem. Thank you. So with that, all in favor? Carried. Second.
Second one is related to Airbnb legislation, and so if I could ask to waive the rules for that. And it's a simple request. Oh, yes, sorry. Carried, thank you. And I did have a complaint in June from a resident who believed that modifications being made to a home around their residence was related to a future Airbnb site. And so I made inquiries with our staff, who sent the building department down, and we certainly did the appropriate investigation and updated the resident, but found through that process, obviously, that we don't have any local legislation. I know Toronto, Mayor Tory announced not too long ago that they were in the process of adopting new legislation that sought to control Airbnbs and their proliferation, and of course their impact on the hotel industry and affordable housing. There's certainly an issue there related to taking housing out of circulation for the purposes of short-term rentals, takes that or reduces the ability for some owners then to provide those same units for long-term rental. So I would just ask simply that staff report back to committee on recent legislation adopted by the City of Toronto related to the operation of Airbnbs, with the goal of adopting local legislation related to the same here in Hamilton. So it's basically wide open. Whatever staff can come back with, I'd like to know, what our options are, knowing that at some point in time, certainly we're not a destination like Toronto from a tourism perspective, but we are, every day that passes, we're more and more part of the GTA, and so it's just a matter of time.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Going to move on to general information and other business. Anything, Mr. Thorne, today? Thank you. And item 11 is the outstanding business list. May I have a motion to approve the change of date for item AA? Moved by Councillor Skelly, second by Councillor Connolly. All in favor? No private and confidential. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Skelly, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.